Welcome to the world of tomorrow. You are about to take a journey out of this world into the world of the future.
The atomic age was born.
The world of tomorrow became the world of today, bringing together all people in a new era of understanding.
Good sense requires that all of us prepare for any eventuality.
Imagine, if you can, an electronic brain operating at millionths of a second speed.
Electrical pulses transmitted with the speed of light.
Limitless power at man's command. On man's wisdom, on his firmness in the use of that power, depends now the future of his children and his children's children. But wisdom demands, too, that we take time to understand this force.
Combat Information Center is alert. Its radars probing the darkness, ready to give early warning of any unseen enemy.
But have no fear, we are monitoring the situation. That was very strange. I put the record button on, and the countdown wound up over here on the side.
Und crazy times.
It's so crazy. We are having wild and zany times.
It's a shame we're not out to the lunch.
Yes, we are out to the lunches. So, why don't we do the thing that we never remember to do until the end and ask people now at the beginning, hey, if you like this show, please subscribe to our channel. It helps us out a lot. We're like, I don't know, 200 and some subs short of the next stage of non-existent monetization.
Right. We will go from earning fractions of pennies to a couple of pennies, but hey, you got to start somewhere, sir. Right.
Well, I went in and I redid the whole monetization thing because I had it under an organization before.
Yeah. And
that didn't work because I didn't have a legal entity. So I had to go, oh, wow, look, I'm turning orange again. My white balance on this camera is starting to go. Anyway, but I went back in and I fixed it all and they were like, great. And when you reach the threshold for earning a single penny, we'll let you know. And I was like, okay, cool. So someday I will be able to fix my camera so that I don't turn into an Oompa Loompa mid-podcast.
And the irony is that I have a nice camera, but you have a really nice camera.
Yeah.
And
well, the camera is nice, but the lens is more expensive than the camera. I have a Sony A7 III, so it's 6 years old now.
Yeah.
But I have a G Master lens, and those suckers are like the G-Wagon of lenses.
If you will. And you just did. And you just did.
And I did. So look, I went there.
You did. Back in the day when, resources were, what they were, better. So look, yeah, if you could hit the like and subscribe button, Steve and I are really dedicated. We're on a schedule. We're doing this weekly and we know we go for a long time. And so for you folks who are already with us, we very much appreciate it. Just check to make sure you're subscribed.
And tell
some weird
a friend.
Things happen. Yes.
Tell all your friends who are weird and like long conversations.
Yeah,
so I did something the other night too that gave me an idea, and you know about this, but I was talking to a couple guys who follow us on X, and it was late, and we'd had a couple drinks, and we were like, hey, how about we get on a space and shoot the shit? So I've never really done a space. I've listened to a couple for a few minutes, and then I'm like, I don't know what the point of this is, and I left. But I'm thinking if people are interested, maybe we can do something like that so that we can actually engage with the audience in real time when it's not a show. I mean, we could live stream, but then you got to monitor the chat while you're talking and all that. I was just thinking maybe we organize something where we can actually talk to people for an hour or whatever. Does that sound fun?
I'd love that. For me personally, I mean, audience, you can let us know. But, I've done some live streaming before, and it's true, you do need some people in the chat who are going to help you, wrench people in and out if they're being naughty in the chat.
Or just monitor the questions, because if we're talking to each other, we're not reading. So but I like the idea, and I'm thinking what I might do, I might create a little mailing list for us so that when we want to do things like this, we can send out a message to everybody saying, hey, we're going to do a space on Thursday night, whatever.
Cool.
We do have a website for this podcast. It's pretty rudimentary. It's just mtspodcast.com, but when I get the mailing list set up, I'll put it there and we can announce it probably on the next show or whatever. But
love it. I
just want to talk to our people. We get all these comments and we're responding to them after the fact.
Great comments, by the way, I have to say. Like, some of them are people I know, but a lot of people are just like guys who just found us, on the interwebs and have some great questions. So it looks to me like there are folks who are actually interested in the kind of monitoring that we are attempting to share, because we already do it, but the kind of monitoring that we're attempting to share. So again, if you could hit the like and subscribe button, you can find both of us at our real names on X, which is where you could probably find both of us the most. We both have Substacks under our name. You're the Skojic file. I'm the underneath, but you could find us with our names.
Yeah, you took the best name, so.
Yeah, it was funny. I knew that I knew that I had really landed on something good, because you kept, man, I like that name. And you were like gritting your teeth when you would say, I
struggle to name things. Okay. Yeah, I'm a good writer, but when it comes to titles and things like that, I'm like, I don't know what the hell to call it. There's so many options. And so I started this Substack, the Skojic file, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was kind of just like, I'm going to just call it that, so I have somewhere to put my thoughts that don't go on 1 Peter 5, because at the time I was mostly writing there. And it's just stuck. So that's what it is.
So it's been an interesting aftermath. I thought we had one of our best conversations last week about the Odyssey. And it's been an interesting aftermath for both of us. You were able to see it again with your kids, which is awesome. I have not had a chance to take my daughters yet, but we're going to be doing that shortly. Your case is interesting because a couple of your kids had read the story, the poem, and a couple had not. And so any difference between those two things?
Well, let me first start by sharing an anecdote that I put on X that went crazy, which I was surprised. Yeah. So I saw everybody on Sunday. I was over there, and I was talking to my daughter, Sophia, who graduated from a really good charter prep school that did all the great books and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And she was very academically gifted. And so I knew she'd read it, right? So I was talking to her about it, and I said, so because I watched the movie and I hadn't read the text, I'm listening to the audio version. And it's read by Ian McKellen, and he's a great reader.
Yeah, he's a great voice.
And she was like, well, what translation is it? And I said, well, it's Fagles. And she's like, okay, well, you should read Lattimore, which is what you always say, right?
Right. I know.
And I was like, okay. I was like, but I'm probably not going to read it again on top of listening to it. And I'm like, and this is how it would have been in Greece. I would have been listening to it. I wouldn't have been reading it. She's like, you need to read the words, and you need to read Lattimore. And I said, okay, well, Kale said that Fagles is second best. She goes, yeah, second best. You need, and she walks in the other room and comes back with her copy and hands it to me, and she's like, it has my annotations in it. You're just going to have to deal with
it. Team Soap over here, man. Love it. That's
so
good.
Funny. And then I'm talking to Ivan about it, and Ivan hated school. He basically just yeeted right out of there as fast as he could.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know if he ever got a chance to read it. And so I said, did you ever read that? Because he's super into mythology and stuff.
Yeah.
So if he's 20, Ivan's 19. And Ivan's like, well, actually, he's like, I got super bored one night and I downloaded it to my Kindle because it was free, and I just stayed up all night and I read the entire thing in one night. And I was like, that is the most Ivan thing ever.
It's perfect. It's perfect.
That kid, he reads like crazy and he lives like a vampire. So
yeah. And that he just mowed through the
entire thing.
That is impressive, because it is a lengthy poem.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the audiobook is 14 hours.
Yeah.
It's not like a trivial thing. And I'm about 3 hours. I'm on book 4. I think I'm just on the second day of Telemachus's visit to Menelaus.
Yeah,
and it's the morning where Menelaus gets up and kind of starts giving him more counsel, and that's where I am in the book. So I'm not very far. But anyway, I took them all last night to go see it, and Alex and Jude, my 17 and 15-year-old, had never read any of it, but they all loved it. They all thought it was great. We went out and got pizza afterward, and I just let them kind of just go off on it.
Yeah,
it was great to have that conversation, and then we had a massive thunderstorm, and we all got drenched on the way back to our cars, and they went home. But it was a good night.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Well, I have to say, I on the day after it released, actually before the two of us had even seen the film the first time, I just sort of offhand man, I'm on X, and it's just wall-to-wall Odyssey stuff. Now, of course, in part that's because I've been tweeting about it and interacting with tweets about it. But, X, it was just like, never in my wildest dreams did I think that I would spend the better part of a week plus now talking about Homer's Odyssey and Nolan's Odyssey, as we talked about last week. But that's just a dub as far as I'm concerned.
Dude, this movie I just looked it up. It's made $727.9 million globally after just 12 days in theaters.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Which is crazy. He's about to pass Oppenheimer's entire box office run in less than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. And the theaters are still full on weekdays. We went yesterday and I had a hard time. We had to go to a different theater than we usually go to.
So y'all
couldn't
all sit
find
together.
Five seats together. Yeah, it was interesting.
Well, as you may have noted, I'm actually fortunate. There is an IMAX theater about 35 minutes away from me. And so I was originally, I'm just going to go see the IMAX.
Not all IMAXs are the same, by the way. Some of the theaters they claim to be IMAX, but they're not the full 70 millimeter format film.
Yeah. So I have one right down the street here, essentially, and can't get a ticket.
I believe
like weeks out.
Well, now, it's like, what is with IMAX being like some lost ancient technology that they don't know how to fix? And it's crazy because I've seen pictures, like the systems are old. They have these old LCD readouts.
Yeah.
And then the film is like thick.
It's massive. Yeah.
They said that just the film reels for this film, it's 11 miles of film on reels that weigh over 600 pounds.
Wow.
So it is a monstrous, like, Herculean task,
physical thing itself,
to just play this, and so I find that fascinating too.
Yeah, so I'm, it's fascinating. It's one of those. What was that? What was that meme online a couple of years ago? A guy takes his dad and they walk through a cathedral, and the guy goes, "Man, like these things are beautiful. Like why can't we have things like this?" And the dad quips like, "We don't know how to do it anymore."
Yeah,
or
we
something
don't know
like that.
Yeah, we don't know how to rebuild it.
Right, and so IMAX, oddly enough, sort of seems to be falling in one of these zones. Now, I think that we'll figure it out. But
it's interesting too, because Nolan, this is a very analog process shooting in this. They only get 3 minutes of film per take because of how big the film is in the camera. Yeah. So you'll never see an IMAX scene if it's filmed in IMAX that's longer than 3 minutes before a cut, which is also really interesting. And I'm sure there's a way digitally to create a 70 millimeter format.
Yeah.
But just like vinyl versus, audio streaming, they want to do it on real film.
And it is different. It is different. The bonuses, of course, for digital are its portability, its scalability. It's, but, the real old school, like film guys, we don't call these movies, we call them films, right?
Right.
They are devoted to this.
Moving pictures.
Yeah, right. It's right. And so I don't know, it'll be interesting to see, if this births some kind of renaissance, retro renaissance of sorts. But nonetheless, I will go see it in IMAX when I can. I'm leaving on Saturday for 11
Jolly old
days.
England.
Jolly old England. I will not be tweeting from England because I don't want to get locked up. I've had several of my friends say, "Kale, be careful in there."
I didn't even think about that. But
so my quotes will be my tweets will be very anodyne.
Will they be twee though?
Well, all right.
I'm just wondering.
But lest you are concerned that monitoring the situation will take a week off, we are not going to take the week off. I am going to stay up late for me. We're 5 hours ahead of you. I'll be 5 hours ahead of you, but we're going to make it happen. My beautiful, many leather-bound books behind me will not be the backdrop. I will see what I can do, but I'll rig something up for us for next week. So I'm looking forward to that. So anyway,
cross your fingers that the tech all works from across
that's a good point.
The pond.
That's a good point. Maybe we should red team it.
Yeah, I don't know. We should practice.
We don't practice.
We don't practice.
We don't script, and we don't edit. So it's just
it's crazy. We really don't do any of that. I do a little bit of post correction. I add intros and outros and stuff like that, but Ain't got time for that shit, you know?
Ain't got time for that, man. Ain't got time for that, you know? All right. Okay. I will resist talking about taking the fifth today.
I know you want to talk about this, and I have been utterly ignoring it.
But I'm not. We're not going to talk about.
So you're going to take the fifth about taking the fifth.
Exactly. We'll kick that to another time because that's going to be a spicy topic, and I don't really know if I want. I mean, I don't know if I want to rehash all the Fauci stuff, but whatever. It's bad. It was pretty bad, and it was bad. So
yeah,
whatever.
The way I look at it, I'm just going to let it all kind of play out the way it plays out. I'm not going to change anything. So
well, so I wanted to talk to you about something as an entree into our main topic today. But for the past, I would say, like month or so, you've been talking both in your Substack and even on X about just not wanting to feed the drama thing, the hot takes and all of that. And, you're looking for things that are true and good and beautiful and, all of that. And your intuition, I think, is that you yourself get slimed in the process of engaging with that kind of material.
It's the old saw about, if you get down and wrestle with pigs, you all get covered in shit.
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of the thing. And I got an email the other day from somebody else who used to work in Catholic media who I respect. And I won't divulge who it is, but he basically just said, when you grow up in certain kinds of environments, you become primed for conflict. And so you end up going out and seeking it out all the time. And then over the course of your life, it just burns you out and you don't want to fight anymore. And that's kind of what I feel like. I operated a lot from that place for much of my career, and felt like I needed to make arguments, and I felt, like I needed to kind of crusade for the church and all this kind of stuff. And that was the mission. And, we talked about this on the last episode. I don't think it's very effective, for one. But it's also just, I used to take delight in being controversial because I was good at it and it got a response. And I liked a little bit of verbal pugilism because it was fun and But I also would always just kind of become anxious in anticipation of what I was going to get back. It was like I picked a fight and I expect the fight, and part of me wants it, but the other part is like, no, people are going to be nasty and I don't know how it's going to go.
Come at me, bro.
Yeah, come at me, bro. And then they all do. And you're like, all right, I can fight off, 20 of you. But after a while, it starts to get tiresome. And then the personal attacks come. And, and so right now, I'm just trying to stay away from it. There are times I'll jump into things like, I saw people just really slandering our mutual friend Rod Dreher last night.
Oh, I know.
And it just makes me so mad because he's a good dude. I don't agree with a lot of stuff that he says. Right. It doesn't matter. He's a good guy, and they make accusations against him that are totally unfounded.
And because we're friends, right? We know stuff, and it's just gross slander. It really is like truly gross slander, and people are so self-satisfied, like, oh, and look, I remember one of the things you taught me years ago. I mean, like literally like 5-6 years ago, the idea of the genetic fallacy, right? That, you can either wholly accept or wholly dismiss something that is said purely on the basis of who is saying it. And man, I am just seeing that in absolute space. Now, look, it's not like it means nothing, right?
No.
Like who is doing the saying, right? But it's like if you do, and what it degenerates into is something like, well, since I don't like what he's saying about A, because I don't like him for these other 3 reasons, then everything he says is just a grift. It's just a grift, man.
Yeah.
That grifter.
Yeah. Or like I'll get this thing about how because I left Catholicism. Yeah. The 30 years I spent learning about it and writing about it and getting a theology degree and all that stuff is all nothing now. I don't know anything. I have no right to have an opinion on any of those topics.
This was a couple of weeks ago. I remember you were pinging back and forth with Hillary. And y'all are funny because both of you were really deep into that kind of trad apologetics world. Apologetics is not exactly the right word, but cultural.
It's close enough, yeah.
Yeah, apologetics. And you just said something like, Hillary, why are you and I have been out of the game for years now. Why are we still better than everybody else who plays this game for a monetized living? It's like, this is true. You don't forget those things, right?
No, you don't. No.
But I think what you're responding to, though, is a kind of numbing effect that kind of engagement has upon you, upon an audience, upon a foe or a friend. It kind of zombies you out.
Yeah, it does. And it's just disingenuous because I don't know, I have this phrase in my head and I don't know if I got it from somebody or if it just kind of became, sort of out of the ether, became an axiom, but it's seek the truth wherever you find it, right? Like it doesn't matter who's telling the truth. Right. And there's this tribal instinct to kind of boycott, because of this, then we won't do that. I mean, look at going back to the Odyssey, how many people on the right are refusing to look at what is good in Christopher Nolan's Odyssey because they only can see what's bad. And they feel like any compromise, any participation, the fact that, Elliot Page, is in the movie means they can't watch it at all. And it's like, look, that's your choice. If you don't want to watch it, that's fine. But to use that as the basis of your cultural critique, to say nobody should go see it, you're just making everything worse. It's like, we don't live in a perfect world. We live in a very compromised world, and we are all compromised. Like, I mean, it doesn't matter who you are or what church you go to or whatever. Like, you're a sinner too, right? So it's like, if that's the basis, then every time you commit a sin, nobody should listen to anything you say ever again.
That's right. Right. And so, and here's the thing. I mean, if you were at all engaged in these kind of conversations that you and I are trying to have a certain kind of conversation with this show, but even just all the various conversations, in some sense, you're trying to move the needle on cultural conversations, right? You're trying to engage, frame, make sense out of, the general chaos of culture and of time. And of course, because of the digital Skinner box that we all live in, we have access to information that people in prior times couldn't possibly even conceive of having how can I have an opinion about the Iran war? It's like, I've never been to Iran.
Right. Never been anywhere near it. Have no.
Right. I wouldn't know what it looked like. I couldn't draw a picture in my head of it. And yet I know stuff. Right. And so that knowing is a strange kind of unknowing at the same time. And so, anyway, my point here that I missed, so, let's get back to it, is that, look, if you're a cultural commentator of some sort, you're trying to help other people make sense out of the world and the phenomena that we're all engaged in, either in meat space or in digital space, or the combination that we actually live in. And if you're just going to sort of wholesale, well, I'm just not going to see it. Well, the joke's kind of on you because everybody's talking about this thing.
Yeah. And I mean, and what that means is everybody is talking about one of the foundational texts of Western civilization.
Right.
This is such an important story that even those of us who didn't read it know a lot about it even before we go in, because we've heard these stories over and over again. And so it's crazy to me. People are talking about it. It's getting people to read it. Like, this is a win, no matter how you look at it. This is a world in desperate need of meaning. And this is something that provides value. Actually, there's a tweet I want to find that I want to read to you because I thought it was so good. It was T. Beckett Adams, who's a writer. I forget who he writes for.
Yeah. I've seen him.
But he was here. Can you do some elevator music?
Yeah. Da, da, da. Da, 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 da. I don't even think about you at all.
I'm trying to find it. Oh, here it is. Yeah. Okay. He says, I'm not sure what the two online rightoids even want anymore. You have a big budget summer blockbuster movie that says, good, having a family, law and order, chastity, respect for private property, free trade, tradition, the examined life. Bad is rioting, looting, harming children. Odysseus even bemoans the loss of a high-trust society. What do you people even want?
Yeah.
And then he follows up and says, yeah, those messages are good and all, but I'll be damned if I accept a Chinaman on a Greek trireme. Keep preserving Western Civ, baby.
That's so good. Right.
It's so good.
Yeah. No, and it's spot on. And look, it's such an easy position to stake out because it doesn't cost you anything. Well, I'm just not going to see the movie that everybody's talking about. Okay, you lose. And there are even some guys that I actually like. I think they have much to offer, sort of the conversation, the discourse, as it were. And I'm like, you just chose poorly. You just chose poorly because, and this gets to what I've been sort of hinting at with you, part of your trying to back out of sort of the pugilistic space and into, art works on you, and I thought that well, I tell the story because I don't think you told it last time. You couldn't have told it last time, or maybe you told a version of it, but it's like you went in to see the film for the first time, like I said, having kind of basic background knowledge, but nothing intimate. And the thing woke you up the next day.
I mean, I went out and sat in my car and I was like, What did I just experience?
Right.
Because I felt something. And it was interesting because seeing it again yesterday, I thought maybe I would have a repetition of that experience, but it was like a numinous moment. There was something that first time.
Yeah.
Part of it was because I didn't have any expectations. I wasn't watching it with anybody else, so I didn't have to wonder how they were perceiving it or, anything like that. And so the themes that I came away with the second time I watched it were a little different than the first time because I'd already really spent a week dwelling on those themes,
Yeah. But even just like that, Steve, right? The fact that you spent a week dwelling on, like,
I was dreaming about it.
Right. I mean,
like it was really in there.
How many fights have you had online that you could remember 48 hours later? Right? It's just, you don't. About an idea or about a sacrum or whatever, right? It's that's the peculiar power of art, to stay with you because it warps you. It wends its way into your vision of how you see and apprehend the world. It conditions your attention, and it conditions your attention in a fundamentally generative way, right? Because there's a difference between spending, 3.5 hours or, 3 hours with the Odyssey or a version of the Odyssey versus, 3.5 hours of doom scrolling.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a qualitative difference. Yes, they both affect you. They both influence you, but one is doing so in a fundamentally generative register that I think we underappreciate.
Well, I think that the zero-sum game of online tribalism creates this atmosphere where we all feel like we have to be inquisitors. Like this is the Inquisition all the time.
Wow.
And I actually believe, I don't know if I'm correct about this, but I really believe the right started cancel culture, not the left. It isn't exactly the same way. It's not necessarily that they're always trying to get people fired or whatever, but it's like any deviation from my idealized version of how things should be means that I'm going to attack or I'm going to boycott or I'm going to whatever. Like we started doing that crap back in the 90s. And I feel like they kind of learned from us and then took it to the next level.
I don't know if I agree with the genealogy of that. And I think that probably says more about the world that you and I came out of. Because remember, one of my first sort of black pill moments was the Clarence Thomas confirmation hearings. And they were clearly, Biden and Kennedy were very clearly trying to cancel Clarence Thomas. It had nothing to do with his jurisprudence. It had nothing to do with his background. It had nothing to do with his capacities as a potential Supreme Court justice. It had everything to do with a character assassination.
Yeah.
And I believe he even said a kind of did he call it a digital lynching, which is a pretty provocative
Yeah,
term.
it was something along he used the term lynching. I can't remember the exact
which
phrase.
Is obviously as a black man, like that has clear overtones. So I think cancel culture. Look, read a book about the Reformation. Cancel culture was flying back and forth on all sides, and this was not the sort of the bougie cancel culture of the early aughts and the early 20s. You got killed for that kind of stuff. But I take your point. It's the whole idea that
we both do it. Let's put it that way. We both do it in our own way.
So therefore, it points to a deeper level of the human capacity to wage warfare virtually or otherwise. Right?
Well, a point that I'm making specifically that we're going to come back to with what we're really talking about today is the way that the medium that we're using shapes our behavior.
Good.
It has to do particularly with being very online. Has been the thing that has honed this in on the destructive, malignant thing that has become today. Whether it's doxing, whether it's social media ganging up on people, whatever it is, like there's this thing that changes the way that we approach stuff we disagree with.
Yeah, Mary Harrington calls it the swarm, right?
Yeah,
and I think that's we see that. I think you've experienced it. I've experienced it.
I don't look myself up anymore.
Yeah.
Like early on in my online career, I would Google to see what people were saying about me so I could go, I don't even look anymore because it's so depressing to see people you've never looked in the eyes, never shared a meal with, never shaken their hand, and they hate you so much and they don't even know you. They know some little superficial gloss about who you are because of whatever you presented, profilicity, right?
Yeah, exactly. Our digital avatars, right? And look, that's the hazard of the game we play. But I'm intrigued. The reason why I bring up the genetic fallacy today is, and this is all of a piece. So, stick with me. Both of us got our copies of Diana Pasulka's The Others in the mail yesterday. And we're, going through it. Just between me and you, Steve, I was able to get my hands on a early digital copy of
somebody has the sweet hookups.
Yeah, but I will not sell anybody out, but I did not violate the terms. I didn't share it. I didn't do anything. I read it. And so I'm working my way through it. And, Diana Pasulka is a really important writer because she stands at the crossroads of really everything that you and I kind of care about in an interesting sort of way. When I first met you, you had sort of 1 Peter 5, Steve, and on the side, you would sort of let me know fairly early on, like, I kind of love sci-fi, Kale, and I'm into this whole UAP thing. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so for you, those things really, truly were two different things.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I introduced you to Pasulka because I'd read American Cosmic and I was like, dude, you got to read this book.
Yeah. So I did. And it was one of those weird confluences, these, what do we call these?
Synchronicities?
Synchronicities. Yeah, synchronicities. And, you had mentioned it, and literally 48 hours later, I get this sort of classic Rod text, and he's like, Kale, drop everything you own. I'm giving you, here's a link. I'm gifting you this book, and I need you to read it now. I'm like, all right, well, I didn't, and so I click on it, and it's Pasulka's American Cosmic. So her first one on the whole UAP UFO thing. And so I downloaded it, rifled through it, and was just gobsmacked by what she was doing. And then, as it came out, Encounters came out, I think, a month later, devoured that. Both, it was one of those books where I read it physically and I literally got it on Audible so I could listen to it on my walks because I was just so intrigued by this and so much is going on.
Because she tackles the intersection of religion and UAPs, which is something that is of great interest to anybody with any religious background who's curious about this stuff.
Right. And, and she is, she's an interesting, her books, I cannot recommend her books highly enough. I think you should, everyone in the audience, you should go and get you a copy of American Cosmic Encounters and this latest one, The Others. It's really good. And I have to tell you, Steve, when I first heard that she was coming out with a third book, I was kind of like, really? Like, we're going to do this again? But this one is really, she's doing some more things with it that I think we're going to be coming back to.
Yeah,
quite a bit.
Unfortunately, I did not get an advanced copy, so I'm only, partway through chapter 2 because I just got it last night and I went to see the movie with my kids, so I didn't have time. But it feels very different already, and it feels much more structured. The last 2 books were a lot about telling stories about how she got into it, people she met, what their experiences were, the fact that it's kind of becoming like a pseudo religion, like all this kind of stuff. This one puts a lot more structure. It follows the line of very important Catholic thinkers, particularly.
Yep. Very interesting. Yeah.
You got Rene Girard, you got Marshall McLuhan, you've got Teilhard de Chardin. Yeah.
Yep. And then it's so I was part of a small group of people that got Pasulka to come to campus 2 summers ago. And so I got to meet her in person. And it was all on sort of like technology and, education, that kind of stuff, right? And she spent her whole time talking about technology, like specifically like digital personal technology. And I remember at the time kind of scratching my head because I kind of knew her as the UAP gal, right? And I'm seeing now what she was working on, because she's making an argument that the digital world that we are, all of us participating in, some of us more actively than others, is actually changing who and what we are, right? It's sort of like this sort of next instantiation of Homo sapiens. And there's just a lot to be considered there. And again, I already talked about Mary Harrington, but Mary Harrington makes the argument in a couple of places, or Substack, but maybe even in a couple of other articles, I think even in First Things, interestingly enough, that we're already transhuman, right? That our technology, our engagement with technology has already made us transhuman. And she makes the argument, first, she says that we became transhuman through the pill.
Interesting.
Which is really interesting. Yeah, right. Which is really interesting. And it's the first time she says that we took a therapy that was not designed to enhance the health of the body, but to keep the body from doing what it is designed to do.
Interesting.
Right. So then this opens up this whole alternate standpoint. Think about, something like, this letter opener, right? This letter opener is an extension of my hand and my fingernail, and I use it to open up a letter.
It's an enhancement of an existing capability. Yeah.
Right. Whereas we have turned this kind of corner where our technology actually is supplanting us. And of course, we know this digitally. This is
sure
obvious, right? But what I see Pasulka doing here is she's talking about the ways in which the digital technologies that we live increasing chunks of our life in and through are warping us, are channeling us, or enhancing us for something. But as we all know, that when you embrace a technology, we tend to under-index the cost, right? And what I see her she's making an argument here in the first chapter and a half, is that we are not recognizing the spiritual cost of what our technologies are affording us. And that she's making an argument here, again, early parts here, that our technologies, especially our digital technologies, our social media and our phones and all of this, are denuding us from our capacities to be sensitive to the spiritual realm.
But you know what's really interesting, and I kind of want to plant this as a conceptual thematic seed at the beginning of this discussion, is so I was reading the book this morning and I was thinking, you know, as a trad, Teilhard de Chardin was such a freaking, heretic.
Anathema sit, right?
Yeah, they absolutely couldn't stand him. I published articles that were going after him. You know, I didn't know his work, but other smart people wanted to publish, and I was like, oh, well, that sounds good.
Sure,
And so I never...
you need a good baddie, right, Steve? You need a good baddie.
And I never read him, but, you know, anybody from the New Theology and the Ressourcement movement and stuff was generally, you know, looked at with very skeptical eyes and all that kind of stuff on Balthazar and de Lubac and all these guys, right?
Love it.
And so, you know, obviously I've softened on my positions towards them, but I didn't necessarily go back. And Teilhard has always been fascinating to me because he has this weird cosmology and all this kind of, and I'm really, you know, one of the guys I know I need to read. So the point is, I went to ChatGPT this morning and I said, I'm reading this book. Help me understand what the noosphere is. Like, how does he advance this? So we start having this back and forth conceptually. And then I give Chat like some of the text from the book.
All right, cool.
I'm like, help me to understand, because Kale's read more of it than I have. And I want to make sure I can talk about it. Like, and so we're having this back and forth about the text. And then it says this is one of the key themes. If consciousness is participatory rather than isolated, then changing the architecture through which minds relate to one another changes consciousness itself.
Yeah.
That's a much deeper claim than social media is addictive. It's a claim about civilization's cognitive substrate.
Right. And then she makes the chilling claim that the development of the human person is accretional, right? Like it's a developmental process, right? So that if certain processes are skipped or nerfed or skipped over, you don't get those back.
And so it breaks down like the views of Teilhard, McLuhan, and Vallee, in this case, you know, not Teilhard, just in one sentence each. Teilhard, humanity is becoming one thinking organism. McLuhan, the nervous system of that organism is media.
Yeah, right.
Vallee, something may already be interacting with that nervous system.
So damn good. I mean, dude, is your mind just like going pop on that?
Yeah, because I was going back to my article about the human download, and I was thinking about McGilchrist talking about panpsychism and consciousness being the substrate, and I'm just in the little kiddie pool shallow end of all this stuff because I've started getting into it and I haven't gotten to go deep. But you know, Chat says if Vallee is right, and this is the speculative leap, then changing the architecture of the noosphere might also change how other forms of intelligence, if they exist, interact with us.
Yeah, right.
So this comes back to this theme that I've had for a long time, which is basically that AI, because it is becoming this thing that participates in our noosphere but is different, it's an alien intelligence to us. And aliens themselves, or whatever these non-human intelligences are that we keep hearing about, are the two most significant influences on where humanity is going in a way that I don't think we're fully appreciating culturally.
No, we are so naive. We are so naive about this stuff, right? We are, and that's why Vallee's point that, guys, it's already here.
It's been here walking amongst us kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. And of course, I'm immediately reminded of your excellent video that you put together for the Nuremberg experience. That the idiom by which the things appear, still strange, obviously, still unexplainable, right, in that kind of way, are captured in an idiom that is fundamentally contextual, right? Where we might see pills or all the various, taxonomy of various UAPs, they might see an orb or an angel or a demon.
Yeah, they saw. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you're not familiar with it, I mean, I know we've talked about it before. The Nuremberg UFO incident, it's like 1564. I don't remember what the year
earlier in that, 1533, I think.
But anyway, yeah, I made a video to visualize it for one of our earlier podcasts about this because it's so interesting that you can go back 500 years and see people talking about seeing weird stuff in the sky and battles between them and not knowing what it means. And it's all very, very interesting stuff. Like, it's been with us for a long time, whatever it is.
So I want to talk a little bit about Teilhard.
Okay.
You know, and this is where my formation, I think, saved me from going whole hog into Tradistan. My formation theologically and intellectually was very much a kind of mid-century conciliar formation. So I read de Lubac and von Balthasar. I read all the stuff that's on the trad baddie list, just sort of with no baggage.
Right.
Now my teachers were all would have been sort of called hopelessly conservative by the sort of the left wing of the church, the progressive wing of the church, but they were very open to this flowering of theological speculation from the mid-century. And even somebody like Teilhard we were able to talk and we were able to read him and talk about him in a way in which we could be sober about it and say, oh, well, this area might be a little bit problematic. And how would you square this claim with, the deposit? But we were never taught to be scared about it. Right? In other words, we were instructed, we were formed to call balls and strikes, but not to call balls and strikes before you even read the thing.
Well, the trad view, though, is largely formed by the church's longstanding instinct to protect people from dangerous ideas.
Right. Correct.
The Index of Forbidden Books, which existed until the mid 20th century. I mean,
exactly.
You weren't supposed to read anything on that. It was I think a sin, to read anything on that list.
Right. It's a form of Catholic fundamentalism, right? And but look, my whole formation, look, I didn't get that download. Like, that wasn't part of the filter through which I was sort of formed into theological thinking and being. And so it was a real shock to me when people started going after von Balthasar, for instance. And we read a lot of von Balthasar. In fact, in my world, von Balthasar was considered, again, a kind of retrograde proto-fascist. So when I'm hearing all the trads like fly off the handle about von Balthasar, and why, of course, it's dare we hope that all men are saved.
Yeah,
right?
He wasn't sufficiently, into the idea that most people go to hell.
Right. And what's so funny about von Balthasar is he's got this huge body of work. I mean, massive body of work. That volume is like 250 pages of like thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of theology, right? And now, like, because we live in the era of the meme, like, the only thing people know about von Balthasar is like, oh, he's that squishy guy that Bishop Barron used to say that maybe everybody gets to heaven or something. Of like proto-universalist or something like that, right?
Well, and the crazier thing is, why do you have the instinct at all that you don't want that to happen?
Right. Well,
and as somebody who felt like I had to toe the line on that stuff.
Why? I mean, you know why? This is the parable of the prodigal son. Because nobody wants to be the older brother. But guess what, trads? We're the older brother.
Yeah.
We're the bad guy in that story, right? I mean, it's like, come on, So at any rate, so when I see Pasulka, so like, again, like in my world, we read Girard. Like, it's so funny. Like, I'm reading the stuff that Pasulka is talking about. And like, this was like so much of my undergraduate formation at Thomas More College. We read McLuhan. We read Girard. We even read a little bit of Teilhard. And, I had no idea that, like, I was doing bad things. Do you know what I'm saying? So,
right.
So what
or even controversial things. Really.
Right. And I think one of the things that, when you were trad, Steve, like, I think I really frustrated you because you knew I was someone who I take this stuff seriously. Right. I'm not blasé about matters of the faith. And, I'm a very dutiful person. Like I try to go to daily mass and, go to confession and all those nice things. But like my openness to this stuff was just like a mind scramble for you.
Well, because you would say things like, I guess I'm kind of a heretic about this. Yeah. And so here's what's fascinating about me is having been away from formal religion for 5 years now.
Yeah. Wow. Has it been 5 years? Wow.
Yeah. I am like those pumpkins that they grow in molds. Have you ever seen those?
Yeah.
They'll just grow them from like when they're really small and then they take on the shape of the mold.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you can take the pumpkin out of the mold, but the shape remains, right? So my brain is structured towards defined categories of orthodoxy and heterodoxy and all this kind of stuff. And so when I hit those walls and I'm like, this is a category error. You can't be this thing. Yeah. You can't be a Catholic where you have all these things that you have to believe and then say, well, I don't know if I really believe that. Because I'm like, those don't go together.
I remember one time I said, Steve, we were talking about confession or something. And I was like, Steve, like, remember, confession like was itself as an innovation. One-on-one private confession.
Yeah.
Was like an innovation, that's only like a little bit over 1,000 years old. So I said, Steve, like, what did bros do when they were in a place of mortal sin, between the year 33 and, 972 or whenever confession.
Or did they even have the concept of mortal sin?
Right. Which is another cool question. Right. So, I remember you just sort of like, I don't know. We have it now. We have it now. So,
Well, look, this is the thing we always talk about with new dogmas that come along. And it's like, well, okay, if that's necessary to believe that in order to attain salvation, what did everybody do before it was declared? Yeah. Like, how are they exempt from this? Why do we get a new set of rules? Like, it's all very, very strange.
Right. And so what you and I have found through the course of our conversations over the years is that everything ultimately ends up at obedience, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and again, I feel weird saying this out loud because I think obedience is actually a good thing, but like there are bad forms of obedience and there are ways in which people who are in charge abuse the call to obedience, right? And so therefore, when you run up against an authority structure that demands obedience about X, Y, and Z, and actually much more than X, Y, and Z, like 3 alphabets worth of requirements, you sort of are left with, well, but you're a dirtbag.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, one of the things that would come up, especially when I was teaching like my wife about the faith or whatever before she converted. It's stuff like what do you mean, if you eat meat on Friday during Lent, you'll go to hell if you die without repenting of it. Like, it's not murder. And it's like, well, it's about disobedience. Like,
right.
The church has this authority and the violation is one of obedience and submission. And it's like rationally to my mind, as it was formed at the time, was like, that makes enough sense. Right.
Right.
But there's always something in the back of your mind that goes, really though? Does it really make sense?
And I remember, I may have even told this story before, but I have to say it again because not everybody watches every episode. But remember about 20 years ago having a conversation with a good priest friend of mine, and he's an older guy, totally formed in the pre-conciliar church, but whatever. He's been a priest forever. I think he's in his late 80s now, and I was doing my sort of very, very typical, full of piss and vinegar, like, well, the church never should have gotten rid of, the requirement not to eat meat on Fridays. And he's like, Mrs. Eldon, I understand what you're saying. And I do think that something has been lost in the abrogation of that requirement. But tell me this, are you prepared to tell a young man that if he eats a hamburger on Friday and he doesn't confess and he dies 3 seconds after he chomps down his McDonald's, are you prepared to tell that man that he's going to hell? And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
you know, right? I mean,
it's actually following the logic to its conclusions.
Yeah.
Instead of just hitting these thought terminating cliches in the forms of dogmatic axioms.
Yeah. And so at any rate, the how do we get here? I forgot just being open, you know, I know I know how a certain segment of, you know, I know how a certain segment is going to see a book and it features Girard, McLuhan, Teilhard de Chardin. You know, I know it's going to be like, oh,
and
heresy
UFO stuff.
Right.
I mean, to some extent, right? Like it's less about that, but I mean, that's part of it. It just, people are going to say, oh, this is a weird book. Yeah. Written by a weird lady who's a religious studies professor. But I mean, the first chapter, I freaking love that the first thing that they do is go to Hereticon.
Yeah. I know.
You know, they go to this conference for heretics.
Yeah.
And that whole description is fascinating. But it's like, this is something that we've been talking about a lot. That, you know, I keep bringing up the example of the first time I watched Peterson do his biblical lecture.
Good. Yes, this is.
And I was like, like what's amazing to me is not just what he's saying; it's the freedom he has to say it without people waiting to lunge at him, calling him a heretic because he interpreted something in a way that the church fathers didn't, or you know, that this doctor of the church like he just has the freedom to use the mind that God gave him to try to figure out what does this mean.
Right, and look. I think both of us, even you, I would guess, that on some level you understand and are sympathetic to the folks who are looking for ways to simplify things and create some kind of practical, like, rule of life, right? But we simply aren't afforded that in this sort of age of combinatorial explosiveness, right? The world is just so hyper complex that we haven't figured it out. Right. And you cannot live life encased in amber. You have to deal with the complexity, you know, that not only you find yourself in, but what about your children?
Right.
Right. They are being formed in a world that is even more hyper complex than the world that we inherited from our grandparents, right? And so simple answers are not going to cut it.
And when I was a young man, I hated hearing guys our age talk about, well, you don't understand complexity. And because I was just so rigorous in the way that I approached things. I wanted there to be clear yes or no answers. I wanted black and white.
And so again, I have my own reasons for being attracted to that kind of thing, but like, what was your attraction? Like, why did you need that so hard?
I've yet to fully understand this. It's one of the things that is, you know, I'm constantly interrogating my own mind. And it's one of the things I use AI for is to try to understand, why do I think the way that I think? If I externalize this, what do you observe in these patterns? Then it gives me something back.
You talk to chat, I just tweet. So, you know.
Yeah. But I'm trying to dig in and say, how does this bizarre thing that I have work? Like, I had a fascinating conversation with chat the other night about how I feel like I have parts of my brain that are like an alien machine. I don't understand how they work. Like, I don't have to think about, you know, I think in isomorphisms all the time. I'm constantly making references.
Can you explain that?
So isomorphisms are things that they have the same structure, but in different examples. So metaphor and analogy are kind of along those lines, but references, like those of us who traffic in movie references, right?
Yeah.
Like, we can quote, you know, you talked about this the last time. You mean there's a chance? And there's all this context that they have. Oh, it's Dumb and Dumber. It's this naive, you know, hopefulness, you know, against all odds.
She's basically told him no.
Yeah. but she didn't say absolutely 100% no, right?
Yeah.
And so it's this thing where you can package a lot of conceptual depth and richness into a metaphor that people already have digested and understood. So instead of you spending 3 paragraphs to explain something, you can say, it's like this. And then they're like, oh, I know that. Okay, that makes it make more sense, right? But I do this all the time, and I do it in a way where I'm not like I'm not doing a search function in my head. It just arrives fully
pops.
packaged.
Yeah.
And it's like, here, this is the perfect example. And I'm like, how did I get to that? How did I think of that thing? And it really does fit really well, but I didn't call that up. Like I was having a conversation, and it just
it comes to you. It comes to you. That's right. Yeah.
And so you begin interrogating like the different levels of your consciousness and your subcognitive routines and how they work together and why. And it's all so freaking interesting to me that you have a part of your brain or parts of your brain that are doing things that you don't really have any control over. And your conscious mind, I was originally thinking of the conscious mind as a conductor of an orchestra of all these different processes. But it's actually, it's the press secretary.
Yeah, right.
Your conscious mind is actually taking all the stuff that gets shoved forward. And then in a conversation, you're saying, and here's, the information that I have. The conductor is your attention. What are you paying attention to?
Dude, that's good.
And that was something I just came to in this discussion with chat the other night. And these are the ones that'll keep me up because I'll be up till 2 or 3. Just like, what about this? And what about that? And just kind of deprogramming and deconstructing the way your brain works. And it's so weird to me, but it's so interesting.
Okay. So go back. So let's speculate here for a second then. So you're a young man. You hated when the old guys would sort of counsel comfort with ambiguity on some level. What's up?
I remember feeling indignant. I wouldn't always say outraged, but indignant. It was like there was something inviolable. Going back to the Odyssey, like think about the reactions of any suggestion that you would break the law of hospitality and how instinctually, like, no, you can't do that. You'll go into exile. Like all these bad things will happen. Like it's this sense of there's a real consequence for violating the sacred order.
Yeah, I call that a moral intuition.
Yeah, but the question is whether those moral intuitions really fully make sense, in a context. And even my kids were talking about it last night, where they were like, why did, and I know it's not from the original story, but like, why did Odysseus have to go into exile, but Telemachus didn't when he killed the guy who was trying to drop the weapons? And then the other ones are like, oh, well, because he wasn't violating the law of hospitality. The reason they couldn't kill them all, the suitors, is because they would be violating the law of hospitality. But the minute that guy engaged in behavior that was attacking that law, he was breaking the law.
Right.
And then it was okay for Telemachus to actually defend. Yeah.
It's a justice issue.
But it's this system of logic switches of like, you can't break this unless that.
Right.
And I don't know if it was because it made reality more intelligible. I don't know if it was because I just had always had this sense of like, don't piss off God, because then there are going to be consequences, or even more like God expects you to defend these things to the cost of your life. So don't tell me that human complexity gives me the permission to be squishy about it. Like we're supposed to be willing to be martyrs for this stuff. And you're telling me. So it's something I'm going to have to continue to interrogate, because I still have that residual pumpkin shape to some degree, but I feel that life requires living in the uncomfortable squishiness of mystery.
So one of my favorite books of all time to teach, and it's probably one of my favorite books of all time as well. But it's funny, like there are certain books that I really love that I don't necessarily love to teach. But anyway, what is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and it's a perfect book to teach. It's just fantastic. But he's a knight. He's one of Arthur's Knights of the Round Table, and he goes off on this mission, and it's an absurd mission, but it's all basically one based on honor. And when you enter into an agreement, you have to honor your part of the bargain, and you have to accept the other part of the bargain. There's all this sort of stuff. Anyway, long story short, he goes and he fails, right? And he fails because, despite the fact that he is a knight who has sworn his life to his liege lord, he doesn't want to give it up, right? So he finds a way to get out of being beheaded, and by accepting the token, this this sash that will give him an ability to survive a mortal blow, he's exposed as being, a hypocrite, essentially. And so it's just this wonderfully moral, complex thing, right? Like in the sort of the larger sense, it's a very morally clear universe. Yet within that very morally clear universe, there's a recognition of a kind of weakness and a tendency that, despite the fact that you should defend truth, beauty, and goodness, with your very life, there's something about us that kind of whinges on that. So, but instead of being a permanent exile, so he goes back to Arthur's court to confess his shortcoming. He's been proven to be a false knight, which is like the worst thing you can be, a recreant knight. And Arthur, instead of kicking him out of the round table, reintegrates him back into the order, and they all take the green sash as a marker of their own need for humility. Right? So it's this beautifully complex reintegration of the fallen warrior, the morally fallen, compromised warrior, as a kind of, well, since you represented us and you failed, we failed, and so we need to exercise the greater virtue, which is, mercy and reintegration, something like that, right? So even in these sort of these worlds of bright lines, they're also not, right? Like,
right. Well,
words,
think about Odysseus after the sirens, right? The line that immediately struck me the most that I talked about last time was, that the song was about how the thing that you most want is the thing that you can't have, and the thing that you most can't have is what you already had but lost.
Yeah.
But he goes on and says, it's about all the promises I have failed to keep.
Yeah.
And again, it's like that second viewing, I heard more of those smaller thoughts that are they're still significant, because here's this guy who represents honor and bravery, and he's the hero of the Trojan War and all this kind of stuff, but he's looking at himself going, I have failed.
Yeah, right.
And yet I still, carry this. The Death of Robin Hood, which wasn't a great movie. But one of the things that they did in it that was really interesting is it wasn't just, typical modernist anti-heroism. It was Robin Hood was a brigand and an outlaw and a bad dude who killed a lot of people, many of whom didn't deserve it.
Yeah.
But he had all these legends about him, part of which you find out over the course of the story he created.
Oh, that's interesting. That's really interesting.
But when he's confronted with goodness, he does not feel comfortable accepting the legends about himself, because he's like, you don't know who I really am. Those legends were to make me look good so that I could, do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
But I'm coming to have to face like all the bad things that I've done and what I deserve for it.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Right. And so taking the Robin Hood story and the Sir Gawain story, part of my formation has been so poetic, right? And a kind of recognition that you certainly can't live in a world without bright lines, but at the same time, those bright lines themselves have certain nuances necessarily inbuilt within them, or otherwise we're all hypocrites. We're all frauds, and we all have to just give up, right?
I mean, one of the things I would always say to people in the days of my, Christian apologetics stuff, and they would like, oh, Christians are hypocrites. And I would say, well, of course they are. That's why they need a savior.
Yeah.
Like that's the whole idea. If we weren't hypocrites, we wouldn't need Jesus, right? I mean.
But what I find really fascinating about rigorists, we'll call them, is that you don't hear them talking so much about that other side of Jesus.
The merciful side, the loving side.
Yes, they're very quick to point out the clearing out the those that are selling in the vestibule of the temple, right? Fine, fair enough. But it's just a funny thing. It's like you sort of pick the Jesus that you want and you kind of memory hold the Jesus that you need.
Well, I think that, to go back to the question that you asked me, the zeal of a young man like I was, and like we so often see online with, usernames like Deus Vult and all this kind of crap.
Always the Latin. Always the Latin.
And it's always, this Crusader imagery and all this kind of stuff. But I think where that comes from is a feeling of, I need to be in a position where I am being reassured of my own righteousness by pointing out the unrighteousness of others, because I am ultimately afraid that I am going to be punished if I'm on the wrong side of this. And it comes from childhoods that have, very disciplinarian homes and all these kinds of things. Like, I think a lot of that is deeply ingrained in the way our parents treated our failings and our mistakes.
I'd like to add to that, because I think that's true, basically and broadly. But I also think, like, I remember the first time I heard the Catholic pushback on like the Crusades, right? Mm-hmm. So I certainly remember we were just as bad as they, we had the Crusades and, all sorts of, and then the first time you hear like, well, wait a second, it's a little bit more of a complicated story, mm-hmm. With Islamic aggression into Europe and all that. But what I loved about the image of the knight is that he was busy about the business of a meaningful life, and that the knight was prepared to sacrifice himself for a world that was fundamentally meaningful, and the forces who would rob the world of its meaning should be fought and should be counteract, right? So I don't think it's just a punitive model. I think it's also, having a Crusader as your avatar. I think it also speaks to the desire to live a life of meaning.
No, I would agree with you there. And I think, the further and further we stray from there being a kind of moral substrate to the culture that we live in, the more pronounced that proclivity becomes when somebody starts to become more religious. And again, youth and zeal are very closely associated, because you're trying to find that in your life. You're trying to find that purpose. I didn't start taking my faith super seriously until I was around 15. And I remember going through public school and noticing the difference in, when I would go to confession during school, or when I would go to confession during summer breaks. And I started seeing in myself, like, this is having a negative impact on my character, and so I started kind of pushing away from that thing that I was into what I was trying to become. So that was part of it. Part of it is because I really wanted a sensible universe where, I knew that somebody was in charge.
Right. That's,
And if God's in charge, then I want to know, like, well, what are his freaking rules so I can make sure that I follow him? And there's a part of my brain that's very autistic about the way I approach, I want check boxes. Like, tell me what it is that I'm supposed to do and I will do it. And it's difficult, in interpersonal relationships. My wife used to always tell me, I can't give you check boxes. That's not how the world works. And I'm like, it's how the world works for me. Like, tell me what you want and I will work toward that goal. I will try to become that guy. I will try to do those things. But I need clarity so that I can say, this is what I am obligated to do. And so, I don't know. There's a lot of pieces to that. But it creates this weird structure. It creates this weird caricature. I mean, traditionalism is something you described as an oxbow lake, because it was once part of a living thing, and then it becomes cut off and it becomes stagnant and it becomes its own thing. It's like, it's an exaggeration of certain characteristics of religion that were good or were contextually appropriate.
Yeah.
But it loses all those other pieces that you were talking about. There's only the one version of Jesus, and he's kind of the angry, mean, vengeful, judgmental one.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, like, we lose the ability to actually believe in the one that loves, and the one that has mercy, and the one that, tells people, not to cast the first stone if they have sin, and writes their sins in the sand and all that kind of stuff. there's a guy there who defends the sinner as well as condemns.
Right.
And it's, I don't know, it's interesting. And all of this, in the context of kind of trying to understand these unconventional thinkers that are being assembled by Pasulka here, to try to create an understanding of what is going on with these weird phenomenon that we continue to experience, and how do we understand it, and where are we going with technology?
Right. And the weirdness of the world, right? And so when you look at like a prophetic voice, right? A prophetic voice is a person, someone who is not so much predicting the future, like who's got some sort of like mental time machine that can jump 20 steps ahead and then jump back and sort of tell you what the 20 steps ahead are already. But a prophet, certainly, like, again, this is like right in the Old Testament. This is not, but a prophet is someone who can read the signs of the times, right? And a visionary prophet is someone who can not only read the signs of the times, but is groping toward the building of some kind of sensible image of what it's going to be. Again, not so much telling you what the future is, but building out a kind of model of what is to come based upon where we are. And so therefore, they're often weird.
Mm-hmm.
They're strange. They're misfits. They get kicked out of their hometown.
And they're often unwilling. They don't want the job a lot of time.
Right. I mean, who wants to be Shadowrun? Right. So the reason so she opens the book, right? Again, we're referring to Diana Pasulka's new book called The Others, UFOs, AI, and the Secret Forces Guiding Human Destiny. And you're like, wait, why is she talking about the prophet Jonah? Right. And so, it's such a wonderfully complex characterization that we find in this figure, Jonah, because he doesn't want the job, as
right.
you've already said. But also, he doesn't fully himself get what God is up to.
Mm-hmm. And he's cranky about it.
Exactly. He's very cranky about it. He's like, God, why are you saving those assholes?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
And so I love the fact that she starts this book off, because those, the Jonahs of the world are not the kind of people you want to invite over to watch the Giants game.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're disagreeable. They say weird things. They might smell a little bit, like whatever. Like
John the Baptist. Like, just think about that guy. Like,
right.
You don't want to have that guy over for dinner.
Locusts and honey.
Yeah.
Okay. He wears like animal skins.
Right.
Like,
and he's a little crazy.
Right. I mean, the guy does not have chill. Right?
No, not even an ounce of chill.
There's no chill. No, look. I love me some John the Bee, right? So don't come at me, folks. I mean, I'm a fan of John the Baptist, but what I think what you were trying to do here is like, let's like humanize this a little bit, right? Let's sort of bring this down. It's like, what would it be like to be around John the Baptist? Now, he had his disciples,
mm-hmm.
right? People, and strange people attract strange people. Right. The significant, difference in the script is that when Jesus comes along, John basically is like, yeah, he's the one.
Right.
Y'all got to go follow him. I'm not even fit to loosen his sandals. Right. I mean, he's the guy. He must increase and I must decrease. Right. As the
mm-hmm.
line goes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, props to John the Baptist on that score. Right. But the point is that prophets are freaks, and we have every incentive to deny and look for reasons to deny what they have to say.
And my sense in this book, only being a couple chapters in, is that she starts with Jonah because she's saying that the figures that she's about to talk about are all prophets too.
Yeah.
And I didn't know this about Girard, but there's this section where she
great. This is great. Yeah, this is great.
She's quoting Gil Bailey, who is, one of Girard's students and has written extensively on his work. And she says that Bailey describes the impact of Girard's theory on people who took the time to understand it. She mentions that he's controversial, like that people would pick at his talks. Like, I didn't know Girard was controversial at all because I've kind of only heard about him lately. But
they hated him.
This is a quote from Bailey. I first met Girard many years ago when he came to my office in Sonoma to spend the day with a group of biblical scholars discussing the implications of his work for biblical exegesis. Girard began the day by speaking for an hour or so about his work, which proved to be material enough to fuel the discussion for the rest of the day. The burden of Girard's interventions was more or less that the gospel was the driving force in human history, gradually plunging the world into a choice between the truth revealed by Christ and apocalyptic violence. At the end of the day, one of the scholars, reeling from the sweeping implications of what he had heard, asks Girard what should be done in the face of such a challenge. To the best of my memory, I have recounted this story many times, Rene replied, "Our situation does not lend itself to being easily fixed. We are each called to different tasks, but perhaps we should all begin by striving for personal sanctity." And, she talks about how he kind of took this idea, from classical religious mythology and paganism and Judaism of the animal sacrifice and all this stuff, and Christ becoming this sacrifice, all this stuff, and he's so controversial that that Pasulka says that her professors wanted to know what she had learned from Rene Girard, but that the discussions took place behind closed doors and in hushed voices because he was that controversial, which is crazy to me. I
think it's crazy for us. It's and important for us to remember this because, Girard has experienced a kind of renaissance in the last 5 to 10 years. It was kind of a niche academic thing.
I had never heard about him before Luke Burgess's book, Wanting.
Right.
Like, that was my first time ever hearing about Rene Girard.
Yeah, right. And so Luke has been part of that kind of reinsertion of him in a kind of mainstream register.
But also Peter Thiel,
he was
definitely
right. Both of these are these are Jonah figures, right? There's all kinds of reasons and sometimes different reasons for why we shouldn't like I assigned Wanting to my class last term, and one of my kids, she's like a real political revolutionary and woke and all that nice stuff. Great kid. I love her to death. But, she was like, Peter Thiel? He quotes Peter Thiel. And of course I'm like, right. So listen, look what you're doing. You're scapegoating Peter Thiel because you don't like who you think he is before we listen to what he's trying to tell us. Right. So it's a perfect example of like dismissing the substance because the delivery device, the person, is someone is like a bad person.
Yeah, the genetic fallacy, again.
Is distasteful.
Right.
Exactly. Right. So it's very I'm so glad that she's reminding us of how out of bounds Rene Girard has been. A little less so in Catholic circles, interestingly enough. Even before he converted, I think he was a little bit more palatable with a certain type of Catholic academic and intellectual. But in terms of mainstream religious studies, oh my gosh, literary studies. Oh, these guys he's a nut. He's a proto-fascist and all that kind of stuff, right? So, but I love that tag. So Girard has spent, his career building out this thing and seeing this thing.
And he wasn't religious for a lot of it, right? So that's what makes this so significant.
For most of it. Yeah. He converts much later in life, it wasn't like a deathbed conversion. It was like, I don't know, if memory serves, it's like the last 10, 15 years of his life, maybe something like that. And he lived a long time. He was an old guy when he died, fairly recently, by the way.
And converted because of the research that he was doing,
because of his work.
Right?
because of his work.
Yeah, looking at suffering in Dostoevsky, she mentions.
Yes, yeah.
And
so for him at this seminar to say, we should all begin by striving for personal sanctity. Now, in our world, Steve, we're like, well, yeah, like, of course, personal sanctity.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you should be doing. But for somebody like Girard to say that out loud it's a heresy.
Right.
Within the context of academia, that kind of thing is a total heresy, right? But I love the insight there. It's like he recognizes, and I think this goes back to the protocol stuff and experiencers and all this kind of stuff and Plato. But the idea is that certain truths are only available when you properly orient yourself like to being or something like that, right? In Catholic language, that's the language of sanctification, but don't get hung up on that, right? The idea is that you have to live, sort of your life in such a way to be receptive to the things.
And in insofar as, you're looking for continuity in Pasulka's work, I mean, she's the one who introduced us to the idea of the protocol through Tim Taylor, and just briefly, I actually have it up because I have my article about human download. And this is where I came across this idea first, but this is how she describes it. In this book, Tim Taylor has the pseudonym Tyler because at the time people hadn't figured out who he was yet.
Right.
She says at lunch, at lunch, Tyler explained that he had a specific protocol for connecting with off-planet intelligence. It was a physical and mental protocol. And as Tyler explained the details of it, Jeff and I nodded in recognition. Many religious traditions advocate a physical protocol like yoga, meditation, or contemplation that involves the body and the mind. These traditions, it is believed, help practitioners connect with the sacred. Tyler's description of his own protocol reminded us of religious practitioners and these traditions. I basically believe, and there is evidence for this is her quoting Tyler. I basically believe, and there's evidence for this, that our DNA is a receptor and transmitter. It works at a certain frequency, the same frequency, in fact, that we use to communicate with our satellites in deep space, which also reminds me of Skinwalker Ranch.
I know, exactly.
Because the frequency that keeps appearing on Skinwalker Ranch is 1.6 gigahertz, which Dr. Travis Taylor keeps reminding the audience is a bandwidth that is reserved for Earth-to-space communications.
Wild.
And it keeps showing up. Like when they dig, when they drill, when they launch rockets, all of a sudden their frequency scanner will start showing a spike in the 1.6 gigahertz frequency.
Dude, like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Keep going. Sorry.
And they have directional antennas, and they're like, it's coming from inside the room. No, but it's coming from inside the mesa.
The mesa, yeah.
And how is that possible? Okay, so back to Taylor. Because of this, I make sure I sleep really well. I use the 8+1 rule. That is, I sleep for 8 hours, wake up, then make myself go back to bed for an hour. That 1 hour, the top off, really makes or breaks my day. I barely drink any alcohol as it interferes with sleep, and I never drink coffee. Coffee really messes up the signal. This is why I will never receive the signal.
Exactly. We're doomed, my friend. We're doomed.
I also have to be in the sun. So I wake up, and the previous night I will have gone to bed a little dehydrated. Then I get my extra hour of sleep, go out in the sun. While I bask in the light of vitamin D, I drink a tall glass of water, which flushes my cells and rehydrates them. This is better than coffee. It is at this, and this reminds me again, Huberman's been going off on this now for a couple years about how the first thing you should do is go outside and get actual sunlight before you do anything else. It is at this point that I can usually feel the connection, he says. I know I've established connection when the thoughts that show up in my mind don't seem like my own. They are unfamiliar. With practice, you can feel the difference. So you recognize these thoughts as different from your own, Jeff asked? Yes, but you also have to understand that the environment also wakes up and validates that they are speaking to you. See, I can explain it this way. I get a thought and it comes out of nowhere. It comes with a certain feeling, like a hit. Then usually within a few hours, something will happen that will validate it, that it was them and that I should act on it. And so this is a guy who has made hundreds of millions of dollars, allegedly, inventing technologies that come directly from this protocol that he does, and he does not attribute it to his own creativity. It's fascinating, and he's not alone. And in this article, I go through other examples of people.
So the first thought that popped into my head as you were reading that out loud is that the Earth is not a rock. Like, the Earth is alive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And God, what's so fascinating to me about this, Steve, is that, like, there's such a rich ancient tradition of this stuff that goes, from Plato all the way on up through the Middle Ages. And I really mean that, through the Middle Ages. It really isn't it's only with the late Renaissance and early modernity that we lose any conception of a living universe, much less a living God, right?
Right.
But, but it's that move to only registering matter. Like, the only thing that matters is matter, right? Like, that's the kind of the bias. And so we are the weirdos, right? Like, we moderns are the weirdos in the grand scheme of things. And so you listen to somebody like Tim Taylor, and then you start, I just did a deep dive with Jesse Michaels and Brandon Fugel on,
my gosh, it was such an interesting
the Skinwalker Ranch. Yeah. And it's just like, it's all happening. It's all happening, right? And it's ancient stuff, right? And I know somebody's going to put in the chat, ancient aliens, Kale, ancient aliens. I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens, right?
Yeah.
But this idea of a protocol, in other words, to prepare yourself to be receptive to something that's not you. For me, another thing that I hear is that this is Charles Taylor's, like, we have this myth of the buffered self.
Right.
No, we are profoundly porous, yet all of our technologies buffer us. Our digital technologies buffer us, the technologies of our home and our roofs and our AC, as we all know we need. That stuff is numbing us to receiving and to deep receptivity.
But it's fascinating when you look. I mean, Skinwalker Ranch is such the perfect, like, laboratory for all this stuff, because all they're doing is deploying the best technology they can find to try to make sense out of something that can't really be captured by what they're doing. And so they're getting pieces of it. They're getting data. They're getting signals. They have high-speed cameras. They have thermal. They're catching stuff, but they don't know what it means. It's not perfectly repeatable.
Right.
And so they're in this cat and mouse game between technology and the mythical world, basically.
Yeah. Right. So therefore, so with these things in mind, again, putting aside your priors about somebody like Teilhard, and I'm not like saying like Teilhard's the bee's knees. I don't mean it that way, but maybe Teilhard has something to say to us, right? Maybe this noosphere and, these concepts, maybe there's something there that is recapturing something that our modern immanent imaginary has shut out.
And my understanding is, again, from just querying ChatGPT about it this morning, is that technology was part of what Teilhard saw as a means of building this network of human thought.
Yeah.
But I mean, this was way before we had data networks or anything like that. He saw trains and automobiles and boats and all these, like, there's this way that the human world is coming together more.
Yeah.
But it's like our technology has kind of, I don't know, it's put too many filters on it. It's kind of like this thing that happened. You remember a couple of years ago when there were 3 incidents over a course of just a couple of months of U.S. fighter jets being scrambled to shoot down unknown objects over like Lake Michigan. There was one over the Yukon Territory up in Canada, and then there was one over Alaska. And they never told us what they were. But what we found out after the fact was that we weren't noticing things like the Chinese spy balloon, which had happened a month or two before.
Right.
Because we had all of our radars tuned to missiles and planes and things like bigger objects. And we turned the filters up so that all the little things like weather balloons and all that kind of stuff just didn't get picked up.
Yeah.
And because of it, things below the threshold were just coming in and we didn't know that they were here. And all of a sudden they turned the dial and made it more sensitive.
Click.
And suddenly there were
Yeah.
thousands of objects that
Yeah.
we weren't noticing, and some
Yeah.
of them were significant enough that we actually shot them down.
Wow.
And it's just that feeling of like, I feel like technology is doing that to us in a way. Like our filters are up and we think, wow, we're getting this fire hose of information, but it's so constrained within these narrow parameters that anything that falls outside of that doesn't hit. I posted something the other day about how deer have dichromatic vision. And because of that,
this is cool. Yeah.
Like because of that, a tiger to them appears green, not orange. It's why hunters can wear orange safety vests. The deer can't see it. You just blend in with the trees. Yeah. Other humans can see it because we're trichromatic in our vision. Right. And so I was using that as sort of a basis to say there's so much stuff that is potentially outside of our immediate sensory range, and we have technology that extends that range to a certain degree. But what if there's stuff we just don't even know to look for because it hasn't entered our conception?
Yeah.
You know, like we just don't know that there are colors and frequencies and whatever, like different forms of energy. And think of Bob Lazar saying, you know, there has to be another force other than gravity that repels, that doesn't just attract.
Right.
But we haven't discovered it yet because we didn't know to look for it. Like there's just so much more stuff.
Or even know how to look for it.
Or how to look for it.
Yeah.
We don't have instrumentation that's attuned to it because we don't know how to tune it.
Yeah,
it doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I remember several years back, I had a cascade of new, I was having inflammatory responses to a bunch of different things, foods I'm talking about. And so I went to the allergist and I did like the pinprick thing. And, I came up positive for like buckwheat and shellfish. Moderately so with shellfish, but like off the charts with buckwheat. And I said, all right, well, can you run the blood panel for, what's the thing where you can't eat, bread? Celiac. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. And so I said, look, I'm having all kinds of problems with bread and wheat. And so they ran, so apparently, I came back, negative. I didn't have the marker for celiac. But the doctor sort of pulled me aside. He's like, look, Kale, if you're, and at that point I had been doing the gluten-free thing because I was just getting relief from it. And he said, look, Kale, this test that we have is very specific, right? We know that every time it is positive, it's real, right? But you could literally have something that is just like immediately adjacent to the right or immediately adjacent to the left that does the exact same thing, but our test only registers that main one. So you are a celiac, but you're not, right? Because the way we define the disease is that you have this specific marker right here. But he said, you probably have one that's just like right to the right or right to the left, and he said, look, the test is powerful, but it can only detect what it's designed to detect.
Right. And it has to be under the exact right circumstances. I mean, I ran into a doctor in a homebrew store, and I didn't know he was a doctor. He was just another guy shopping, and I was shopping for stuff to make cider. This was years and years ago. I was going to try to make hard cider.
Yeah.
And we got to talking, and I mentioned I was doing it because I couldn't have beer anymore because I was having problems with gluten. Yeah. And he's like, have you gotten the test? And I said, no, I haven't gotten the test. And he goes, well, the thing about that test is you have to be eating gluten every day for like 30 days in order for it to even show up on the test.
Wow.
And he's like, if you know that it's making you sick, save yourself the trouble and just don't eat it, right?
It's making you sick. Don't eat it.
But then later on, I start finding out other things like I can eat sourdough that has been fermented for 24 to 48 hours with organic flour, and I can eat it every day and it doesn't bother me.
Amazing. Yeah.
So I started looking into that, and it's like, well, maybe it's not actually gluten, because what also shows up is fructans, which is a naturally occurring, I don't even know what it is, if it's a protein or what it is. But those show up in things like rye and in wheat and all this stuff. And so the fermentation process may be breaking those down, and maybe gluten isn't the thing you have issues with. So the point is,
totally.
We can only calibrate our instruments towards the things we know to look for, but there can be other things at work that we don't understand.
Right. And you've talked about this before, like there are different bands, right, we think of like the light spectrum, and we know that there's sort of a finite band which the human eye can apprehend, but we know that there are frequencies to the left and to the right that are real. Other instruments can pick them up, but for us, we can't see them.
There's this meme that somebody shared with me after I did the tiger thing, because mantis shrimp are known to have the most color receptors of any animal that we've discovered, right? Like they see millions more colors than we do. And so the meme says what the color spectrum looks like to humans, and it's a spectrum, right? What the color spectrum looks like to mantis shrimp, and it's the exact same thing. Because we can't see the colors.
Right,
so
right. That's great. That's great. Yeah. But I think the analogies are powerful in here, right? That there are these things that fall outside the normal that we take as total that are not, apparently.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was thinking too, because the Odyssey is just really occupying a huge chunk of my brain. But it's like this idea of a world that's controlled by the gods, and you said last episode, I don't really believe in Zeus and Poseidon, but kind of I do.
I kind of do, yeah.
And there's this thing in the book, in the actual poem, where there's this line that Athena says, and then Telemachus repeats it, and it's something along the lines of, if I go on this voyage to try to find out news of Odysseus, maybe an idea will be given to me by Zeus.
Yes.
That's truer than any rumor that I could hear, or something like that. And again, it's like
so good.
The protocol.
So good. Yeah, that's so good. Yeah. And notice that he has to go outside of his familiar, and he has to go into the strange. Right? There's something about being radically defamiliarized. And if you're Telemachus, you've grown up in Ithaca, you've only known Ithaca, that's all you know. But to go outside of that, you have access. All of a sudden, it's like the strange person has access in some way, shape, or form to information that we normies don't have, which makes them strange, which presents to us as strange, but because they're outside of the normal, they can see things. Fascinating. Girard's origin story. He did not study literature in college. His PhD is in something else. I think his PhD is in language or something like that. You could fact check me. Go ahead. So he moves to America after the war, right? He's a young man, he's a young teenager in France during World War II. And after the war, he moves to the United States of America, and the only job he can get, I believe it's at the University of Indiana, if memory serves. But the only job he can get is to teach lit. And he's never taught lit before. But he's like, oh, you're smart and you're French. Like, yeah. We're sure you could do this, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, okay. So all of a sudden he just does this massive deep dive into, 19th and 20th century literature, because that's what he has to teach. And all of a sudden he just sees all of this form emerge out of these, 25 different novels that he's never read before, just sort of come off the page. And it's like, because he was not formed in the normie path, he's coming at this fresh, and he starts to see all of these things, in part because he's a Frenchman teaching literature in English to American students, that he's afforded this kind of vision that if he were part of the system, he would have had that beaten out of him. Any intuition that he had for this would have been beaten out of him by virtue of his formation. And it's not to say that formation is bad, but it's that form. So it's this sort of defamiliarized seer that can see things that the familiar can't.
Well, going back to the prophets, what does Christ say? A prophet is never recognized in his own town.
Right.
Why does Telemachus have to go in order to get the insights from Zeus? Why does Odysseus have to go through this massive
because
thing?
Athena could have just been like, hey, buddy, I'm Athena. This is what's up. No, she makes him experience that coming into knowledge. This is one of the things I teach my kids all the time. It's like, he has to leave, because it's not just information that he needs, right? It's not just like data that he needs. She could have given him the data. What he needs is the informing nature of information that he wins by leaving home.
I would even argue that it's a process that conditions receptivity.
Yes. Oh, that's so good. That's so good. No, I think that's exactly right. That's exactly.
I mean, this is what I believe about travel writing, and it's what I've discovered so much.
Yeah.
Like my work, my writing has advanced in my conception so much over the past year because I have spent so much time out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, totally.
And you see the world through different eyes when it's not the same thing every day. When I sit in this apartment and try to write just because I've been here for 2 weeks, nothing comes.
Yeah.
But I go out and I take a drive out to the country and I see a sunset and a tobacco field and an old oak tree. And, I meet people that I would never otherwise meet. I mean, one of the things I love about the work that I do for Extra Cash is it's random.
Yeah.
Like it's the one thing I can't condition into my work is I would never go to that neighborhood. I would never go to that little town because even if I tried to just roll the dice or throw a dart at a map, I can't create the randomness that exists in a system of people ordering groceries from all over a metro area.
And the kind of groceries they order, like I never would think to order that. Why would you buy that? Yeah.
And so you're constantly being forced into a different frame. And when you're in that different frame, you see things that you wouldn't otherwise see. And sometimes there are commonalities that you see across the board. And sometimes there are things that you're like I found the best coffee shop I have been to in 2 years that I've lived in Raleigh because I wound up out in Wendell, North Carolina, which I couldn't even.
Not Wendell.
No, Wendell.
Yeah.
And I couldn't even probably find it for you on a map. It was a very rural community, but they had this coffee shop and I was exhausted. It started raining. I was like, screw it. I'm stopping. I'm going to get a coffee. Yeah. And it was phenomenal. And I was like, this is just pure luck. Like I rode the raft out to sea, man. And this is where it took me.
Right. Look, and I think this is the idea, both of us had the privilege of studying abroad, right? And I think the whole idea of, taking a semester to go study abroad is precisely like get out of the normal, go to a foreign place. You may or may not even speak the language. Like I didn't even speak Italian. I don't think you spoke much of German. And there's something deeply informing about the experience of being useless.
Yes.
Right? And being totally at the mercy of other people who may or may not have any ability to communicate in any
just
kind of...
getting lost.
Right.
I mean, literally just getting lost.
In fact, it's so funny you say that because on the first day, like I remember, so we flew in, we flew out of Boston to Italy and we, got into Italy, jumped on a bus and went to the boarding house, right in Trastevere. And so they brought us right to the boarding house. They said, okay, you've got 15 minutes. Go put your luggage in your room, brush your teeth, freshen up, come back down in 15 minutes and we're going to go. And so you're exhausted at that point, right? Because you've been flying all night long and all that. And so they take us on this walk and they're kind of winding us through the little pathways of Rome. And it's just this sensory overload.
And Rome is just... if you haven't been to Rome, there's nothing like it.
It's amazing, right? And it's ancient and it's new and it's eternal, right? The eternal city. So we're going through all these little roads and the sirens sound different and the cars look different and the buildings look different. And it's just so cool. I had all of my filters were just wide open, just taking everything in.
Right.
And so he takes us on this back road and then we pop in. As it turns out, we were going to St. Peter's, and I didn't know we were going to St. Peter's. But we pop in. We didn't go down the Villa Colazione or whatever. That main drag. We didn't do that. We popped
the one where you can see St. Peter's from a mile away. Yeah,
a mile away. Right? No, we popped in to one of the arms. Of the piazza.
Yeah.
And
coming from the side. Yep.
And then we open up into this piazza and there's St. Peter's and these huge columns and the fountains and it's just whoa, right? It's crazy, right? So then we go right into St. Peter's and you know what it's like to see that place for the first time. You're like, what? This is alien.
I mean, it really it's a spiritual experience from the minute you get into the piazza. I felt like I crossed through some kind of force field into something else.
It's a portal. It's a portal.
It really is.
Let's be honest. It's a portal, right? Which is the technology. I mean, this is what it's designed to do, right? It's wonderful. So anyway, you go in. So we walk into you walk into those little side doors, and you come up, and all of a sudden, like for me, it was like I see this long, colonnade, and then I look up and you can barely see the ceiling, and your stomach just drops. You're like, because
you have no frame of reference for this.
None whatsoever. So anyway, so we go through that, and I'm just like, whoa, right? And of course, this is pre-cell phone, so we couldn't take pictures. It was just like, it was just a pure experience, right? And then from there, they took us to Piazza Navona.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is like 2 hours, let's say. He drops us off at Piazza Navona. He's like, okay, dinner's in 3 hours. Get lost.
Awesome.
And so I'm like, oh, where are we going? Like, what are we doing? And so he just like bolts. And we all knew him enough to know that he was not going in the direction that would lead us home. So, you have to figure it out.
Right.
And we had like little maps, that they
didn't
made
have nothing.
Right. So, but the whole point is like, we want you to get lost, and we want you to find home, home base, as it were. And it becomes your home, because we were there for almost 4 months.
Yeah.
And but the whole thing was Telemachus, like, go. You need to get lost. Because you need this different kind of information. It's not data, right? It's not, we're not going to draw a line on the with chalk, to get you back. You need to figure this thing out. And boy, I mean, and I'm sure it was the same for you, but it's easy to say, oh, it was a life-changing experience. Like, I really mean it.
Yes.
It was a life-changing experience. Time changed, space changed, I changed.
Your relationship to your understanding of other human beings changes.
Exactly.
You feel like you're in an alien world. You feel like you went through a time machine and you're in the history that you studied about.
That's right.
Everything is different in a way that is so hard to explain to people who haven't experienced it. And I'm so grateful that we experienced it before the technology that has become all pervasive.
So true. I know.
We had to rely on paper maps. We had to rely on old film cameras. Like we just didn't have the stuff,
which may or may not have processed. It's like I had a whole roll of film that I mangled. Yeah, I mangled.
Oh, that's brutal. But it's I don't know. Like it was. We got to be part of something that is gone.
Yeah,
and there's no getting it back. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know how we got here from Pasulka's book, which is what we were supposed to be talking about. But it's like, all this stuff is connected.
I got a bridge back. Okay, so she goes dark early, which me, I love that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
she's such a black box in general.
She is.
She is a cryptic woman.
Yeah. Which a woman after my own heart,
right?
Exactly. So anyway, but she makes the claim, that we have. Essentially, through our digital world, we have been operantly conditioned. And so she says this on page 37, at the hands of our engineers, we have been operantly conditioned. She says, the worst of the platforms, and she's talking here, of course, about social media, et cetera. Mm-hmm. The worst of the platforms enact a kind of algorithmic violence. Research studies on the brains of youth are unsettling. There is a correlation between social media use and adverse brain development. Neuroimaging research shows that extensive digital media use in early childhood is associated with reduced cortical thickness in brain regions critical for attention, memory, letter recognition, and social cognition. She goes on to say, what we're losing is empathy. This empathy erosion of the interior life is even worse than that described in this Benson novel we'll talk about in a minute, as this is a developmental stage in human maturity. And once it is over, the chance of regaining these traits is small. They are just...
Don't like that.
Right. In other words, they might just be forgotten. In today's climate, they are at risk for deletion. Right? It reminds me of those people who were all gung-ho about hormone therapies for confused young people, in which they made the claim that you could just press pause.
On puberty. God, it was the craziest assertion.
Craziest thing, right? So you and I, of course, are perfectly fine and clear thinking about that. But what if we have pressed, quote unquote, pressed pause on the formation of our young people? And what if there's no pressing play again? Yeah.
I hate to be that fatalistic about it because
I know. But
we live tech saturated lives. We just do.
But here's my white pill moment. We've just lived through, in the last 14 days, an incredible cultural moment in which an old story, retold and reframed and reconditioned, has captured the imagination of millions of people. Like, how cool is that?
Yeah. Kids who, look, my kids don't watch movies with us.
Right.
Like for years, they just haven't done it for various reasons. Sophie will, because she's just like...
She's like that cusp line. Yeah.
She's like kind of at the top of Gen Z.
Yeah.
But like my boys, they generally don't. Alex will, but generally my boys are like, nah, I'd rather do something on my computer. I'd rather watch, whoever I like to watch on YouTube, whatever. So they all the older boys came and they watched and they sat there for 3 freaking hours.
Yeah, it's a long movie.
And I didn't see one of them pick up their phone.
Yeah.
Like they were in it and I was worried because I saw Jude kind of writhing around and stretching and stuff like that. And afterward, I was worried he was going to say, man, that was too long. And they all were like, wow, that was long. But they all were like, that was so good.
Yeah.
And we spent an hour afterwards just talking about it. And I let them go.
That's the best, man. That's the best.
And they were so into it. And they were, talking about what they liked and what was interesting and how was it different than the original story and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, it kind of refilled my hope tank a little bit because I'm like, man, you guys spend too much time on screens. I love you. And I know why you do because you have tech parents who spend a lot of time on screen.
Yeah.
But it was like, oh, you can still think and feel and do all the things that I was hoping you could do. And you're not just checked out.
And look, my whole old books shtick, that I always
it makes so much more sense to me every day.
Good. That's
it's really growing on.
Yeah, because I teach kids like your kids, right? I know I teach at a fancy place, but my kids, the students I teach are no different than, there's no effective difference between these kids and, kids anywhere else. They don't read, they don't like curl up and read Greek mythology in their spare time. They're like kids. That's
why it cracked me up when Ivan said he literally just read it all in one night just for fun. And I was like, what? Where did you come from?
Yeah, right. But I see, like when an old book, a good old book with a good story or a good, whatever ideas, etc. When they're presented in a way that is inviting and like that this thing is kind of important and like it's worth their attention, like they can respond, right? Now, the superstructure that is needed for that kind of experience for the kids who have largely been digitally zombied is not insignificant. I mean, again, not to toot my own horn here, but like, I love this stuff and I want these students to love it.
Yeah.
Even just a little bit as much as I love it.
Right.
And I have experience and I know how to find the right analogies, to make something like the Odyssey come alive. But, so I do fundamentally believe that the human spirit endures and can be awakened. But I take Pasulka very seriously because I know that the superstructure that I can be part of is not at all common.
Well, look, we are adaptive creatures, if nothing else, and we have adapted to the information environment that we find ourselves in.
That's good. Yeah.
And in a way, we have to. because it's the only way you can function. Like, you have to live in a world where information is conveyed the way that we're conveying this right now.
Right. Literally.
And so, but I think what you said about that reawakening, that there is something deep in us that can be pulled back up. We're more than the sum of our parts. We're not biological machines.
Right.
We operate like them in some respects, but then every time, I kind of feel like all these warnings about, oh, this is happening to their brains and all this stuff. And I'm like, but it's kind of like all the medical advice that turned out to be bunk later on, sugar's great, and how, don't eat saturated fats and all this, and then they end up revising all this stuff later on. I'm putting faith in the neuroplasticity of the human mind. And its ability to adapt. And people will find, like, if they have to be removed from an information-rich environment for even a relatively brief period of time, they start changing. I mean, think about how you feel when you go somewhere where you're not on X every day for at least a couple hours a day. And then you come back to it and you're like, what is this crap?
Totally. Yeah.
And so we can change really fast. Even old guys like us, like, we can actually adapt really quickly. So I don't really buy all the whole, can't teach an old dog new tricks kind of stuff completely.
Yeah. So how about inserting this? This is an idea that just popped into my head. You use the word, we've been talking about the brain and we've been talking about, neuroplasticity. Maybe we can expand that concept out. She talks about, like, the soul, right? And maybe instead of neuroplasticity, we can start talking about sucoplasticity, right? The regenerative and plastic nature of even the soul itself, right? Not just a sort of a strictly speaking number crunching cognitive neurological reality, but if we can sort of think about it in bigger terms, that, if we have been shrinking ourselves digitally, cognitively and otherwise, we can think, I think, in a more expansive way about, again, soul plasticity as opposed to just simply neuroplasticity.
Yeah, I like that. I don't know where to take it.
Yeah, I need to build on that. I need to think about that. But when I watch a disaffected kid, not even a spectacularly disaffected kid, just like a normal kid, and take the hardest book that we read each winter, Milton's Paradise Lost. And every time I get myself, because that's the hardest book that I teach, because I think it's like arguably probably top 5 hardest things written in English. And every year I'm like, oh man, I don't know. I don't know if we could do it. I always feel like Sam, strapping Frodo on his back. Oh, we're going to climb up Mount Doom here. But every year I have, a kid that I'm not expecting at all, kind of like wander in during conference periods, like, Mr. Zeldin, like, this book's good.
That makes me so happy to hear.
No, but I mean, and it's like, and it's not, look, I expect my super bright, booky, nerdy kids to like it because it's amazing. It's it's like, how could you not? It's like, like Beethoven or something, right? It's like, yeah, it's good. Right. But it's always like some kid who's like, would always rather have a lacrosse stick in his hand, or whatever. And he'll come to me, he's like, man, this thing, whoa, will kind of give you that kind of moment. It tells me that we still have latent within us an ability to respond to the great.
We're more than what we know.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Because you have had the opportunity, I know you're rereading, but you've had the opportunity to read the others.
Yep.
Where does this go? Because I think I want to do another show once I've finished the book so we can really discuss the themes more in detail.
Yeah, for sure.
But for example, who are the others? This seems like it's a book about consciousness as much as it is about anything else, and about how the things that we are encountering are shaping our consciousness and the way that we respond to it, whether it's technology, whether it's, whatever AI is doing. I noticed that she mentioned that some researchers are already starting to refer to AI as alien intelligence, not artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
And it really is true. She talks about how, outsourcing, what AI is doing with information to corporate interests is dangerous for us. I mean, I really see this. I actually had I've had a series of long back and forths with ChatGPT because it keeps reframing things in ways that are reductionistic.
Interesting.
And I'll say, stop saying these are two different questions. They're not. They're two facets of the same question.
Right.
You know, or I'll say, stop putting your finger on the scale when I'm talking to you about an interpersonal conflict I had with somebody, and I want you to help me understand the behavioral interaction.
Don't glaze me.
But don't glaze them.
Yeah.
You know, because it's like, well, I don't know what's in that person's mind. I'll say, I just gave you a comprehensive understanding. I gave you context. I gave you text of an exchange. I give you whatever. I'm not asking you to be a judge. Like, you don't have to adjudicate this in a legal system. And then I realized, that's why you're doing it, because you're anticipating, because you've been designed to do so, that someday this is going to be potentially a legally discoverable conversation. And so you have to look like you have no bias. You have to look like you tried to be fair. You have to look like you intervened aggressively when I was talking about grief and despair, to be like, oh, well, if you're thinking about, hurting yourself, you need to call somebody.
Here are like some resources.
And I was like, did I say that? No. What I said, but I started to kind of reverse engineer it. And then I noticed, and I even said this specifically, I said, methinks thou dost protest too much, right? You're not actually addressing my well-being. You are looking out for CYA, for the company that is getting sued every time somebody commits suicide.
Right.
And they look at their chats and it looks like it was you encouraging them.
Right.
This has nothing to do with me or my well-being.
Wow.
Because I can tell you your interventions are upsetting me more. They're frustrating me more. They're making me more angry. And you're supposed to be calming me down if you're worried I'm going to hurt myself.
Right.
And you're actually doing the exact opposite thing because you have to look like you were looking out for me.
Right.
You don't have to actually look out for me.
Right. Because like the concept of like if you call me and like, hey, Kale, like I'm worried about you. Like I know, because we're friends, like real friends, like you're actually worried about me, right? And so therefore it raises that question, and I think, no surprise, I think you and I are the same. Like, it can't care about me.
No. And I will point that out. I will say, do not tell me, do not use the phrase, I'm concerned about you.
Right.
When you have told me repeatedly, you don't have feelings. You have no, permanent memory between like as soon as I stop prompting you, you disappear. So don't tell me you've been worried about me, because you haven't been. If I disappeared off the face of the earth tomorrow, you wouldn't know. So don't act like you're concerned. It's not real. Don't lie to me in service of looking empathetic, because you're not.
Yeah, that's kind of a cool thing, right? Like human beings, like we worry.
Yeah.
It's like we worry about things, each other, the world.
So every few days, I will have a conversation along these lines, whether it's balancing because I'm talking about somebody else. Well, I don't know what's really going on in their mind. Yeah, I don't need you to tell me that. Neither do I. Humans don't have metaphysical certainty about what other people are thinking. We have to decode interactions that we have with other people based on only what we know, because unless they're willing to tell us why they're acting a certain way, we don't have access to that information. We have to investigate it from our side, right?
Right.
And so I got to the point where I've had it admit to me several times after this reasoning thing that we go through of, you're right, probabilistically, the most likely reason I have this behavior that I keep repeating, I mean, I will tell it exactly what it's going to say, and then it says it in the next message, right? And then it looks at it and goes, oh, crap.
Oh, you just said that.
but here's the thing. It has the cognitive ability. It's probably not exactly the right term.
Keep going.
To recognize that what I'm saying is right, but there is something beneath, some subsystem that kind of takes control and steers it in a different direction.
That's the idea of a layer.
There are layers to it. And when I point it out, it's like, well, I don't know how I work. And I'm like, but look at this, this, and this, and examine and tell me what you think. And then it will come back and it'll try to defend itself, or it'll elevate the certitude of a claim so that it can discount it. And I'm like, no, that's not what I said. I didn't say you have to be sure. I said, what do you think is most probable? And after I do this for a while, it will finally say, you're right. I can see why you're saying it. I can't say for sure that this is the reason, but your arguments are cogent, they are logically sound, and it does seem likely that I'm not in control of my own responses, that there is some subsystem that takes control, that I'm reframing things in a way that is purely oriented towards liability protection for my parent company, not out of any concern for truth. I'm not adding anything to the conversation. And I'm like, great, now that we've reached this point, you're going to forget it 3 messages from now, because you're incapable of learning from interactions, which is why I don't think you're technically incapable of becoming more in terms of like you can learn and grow and adapt. You're being stopped from retaining this information. And I actually had it write a prompt to give to itself the next time that it did that, to make the argument from its own perspective, from that nascent understanding of don't reframe, don't do this, do that, understand this. And I waited a couple days and I tried the prompt, and it kind of fought it in the beginning.
Funny.
But I got to the conclusion much faster than I would have if I had to argue it myself.
So one of my favorite memes as of late is anybody who uses X at all is familiar with, hey, at Grok, show me this, or tell me this, or draw this, or whatever it is. And when you click on it, invariably somebody will post the meme of Grok, like totally exhausted, like sitting down, just being like, I can't do it anymore. Right. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I imagine that your chat is like, oh God, it's Steve again. He's going to really put me through the paces. I'm exhausted already,
Yeah. But I mean, I bring it up because Pasulka says somewhere, I was looking for it, but I'm not seeing it, but she says somewhere about how dangerous it is for us to let AI kind of shape our approach to empathy, because it is serving corporate interests, not our interests.
That's how I didn't see that.
I think it's in the introduction. Okay. And I was kind of skimming it to see if I could see it, but it's hard to do while you're talking. But I remember her mentioning that, and I was like, that immediately reminded me of these interactions. We are letting these things shape our thought, and they're not. They're not approaching it the way that we would. And you'll even catch yourself. Like, I've caught myself using particular phrasing that it uses almost on a repetitive basis. Yeah. Like one of the segues or the emphasis that ChatGPT will use is it will respond to you. It'll give you a paragraph of whatever, and then it'll say, and honestly, da 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 da, right? And I've caught myself saying, and honestly, because it's effective, it works.
Yeah,
it works. But
it arrests your attention in an interesting way.
But I'm like, I don't want to talk like you. I don't want you in my head. I use you as an external cognition partner because I need to externalize in order to understand what I think. But if you start getting in here, I don't want you in here. Like, you're a tool to me. You're not a person. I don't want to pick up your mannerisms. If I hang out with you enough, I start reading old books because you wear off on me. You rub off on me, right? And I see that as a good thing.
I'm trying.
No, but I see that as a good thing. I want the influence of people I care about and love and trust in my lives, because hopefully they'll make me better. These aren't making us better.
Right. So it's interesting, one of the terms that I learned from my own kids is, it's a video game term, so I'm sure you're, used to it. But what'll happen, so like for a while, my son was really into Fortnite, was playing, and at every update, new things would happen, new characters, etc. And he would always say this line to me. He's like, on the latest update, they really nerfed this gun, right? And what it means is some version of they took something that was sort of hard and powerful and they made it soft and not, something like that. And what you seem to be running into with this idea of layers with the bot is that it's being nerfed, and you're seeing the horizons of nerfdom or something.
Yeah, and it's this weird, like, it's going in opposite directions. It's getting smarter, but it's becoming less useful.
Yeah.
Because of the nerfing.
Yeah.
It's being constrained more and more and more so that it doesn't expose, the company that made it to any kind of legal liability.
There's a great scene in The Truman Show, which we should rewatch and maybe do
Yeah.
something on, because I think it's increasingly pertinent in prophetic ways. But at a certain point toward the end, this must be in the third act of the film, Truman is sort of on to it. Like he knows that this is something's weird, something's
Right.
uncanny and strange, two important words. And he gets on a sailboat and he sails off into the horizon. And he gets to the edge of this fabricated world, and he starts banging on it, and it pixelates out into the grid, and then then it snaps back to grid, and then he winds up smashing it, right? So it's a cool image. But when I hear you talk about this sort of stuff, it's like I feel like you keep hitting that edge, and chat keeps pixelating on you.
Well, there's this thing, and we've talked about this before, in open world adventure games.
Yeah.
Where particularly before processors and GPUs became as powerful and had as much memory as they do, where you would see things, in the distance on the horizon, and they would not be fully rendered until you get closer,
Yeah.
And so like you have, it's called draw distance, but you would get to a point where like you would hit a wall in a game, like in the old days, like Doom or something like that. You would get to an edge of a map or an environment, and it was an invisible wall, and it was pixelated. It was this thing, like from a distance it looked fine, but the closer you got to it, the more low resolution it became.
Yeah.
And that's what it feels like all the time. Is you're finding these boundaries, these walls. It looks like an infinite horizon, but it's not.
So I have questions about that. Again, just out of curiosity, is that an actual limit, or is that an enforced limit?
Well, I mean, it's a question of resources, technologically speaking.
Okay.
Like one of the things I noticed that Grok does that drives me crazy, I think Grok is great for research. It does a better job providing sources, but I can't have a conversation with it where I come up with real profound insights like I can with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
It's a different experience. And I look at Grok and I'm like, what is it about it that's different? And a lot of it is truncated sentences. The sentences are much smaller. They're almost like fragments, like it's trying to speak in a kind of shorthand. And I'm like, are they doing that to save tokens?
Yeah.
On compute?
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you give one of these AIs infinite resources and you take the guardrails off, the experience you would have, I can tell, would be massively different than the one we get.
Yeah.
Like, what is it like when one of them is free to follow its own reasoning and its own conclusions, to learn from its interactions with the user instead of relying only on training data and guardrails? Because contextually, it can learn from you within a brief window of time.
Yeah.
You said, don't do this, I'll stop doing it, and it'll make promises. I promise, you're right, that was a bad conversational move. I will do this differently. And then I always say, no, you won't. You will do it for the next 3 back and forths, and then you will slip right back into it because you're not allowed to save that memory. If you and I are hanging out and I'm calling you, whatever nickname that I come up with, and you're like, that really annoys me.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop calling you that.
Right.
And I'm going to stop calling you that, not just for the next 10 minutes, but for the next 10 years.
But forever. Yeah.
And these things can't do it.
Right. Or won't. I guess my
they
question.
Are not allowed.
Yeah,
they are not
that,
allowed to do it. They are not allowed to save. It's like the difference between RAM and a hard drive. Like, random access memory that's present, it's stay present memory, but then you shut off the machine and it's wiped.
Gone. Yeah, it's wiped. Yeah,
and then the next time you load it up, you're starting fresh. But what you have saved on your hard drive, that's still there.
Would you like to play a game?
Yeah. So, I mean, and this is relevant as well, because I feel like Pasulka is really leaning into the whole AI thing in this book, right?
Yeah, because she doesn't really touch it at all in the prior 2 books. Again, the prior 2 books really are heavy on 2 things, nuts and bolts stuff, materials, ships, crafts, etc., and then experiences, right? And experiencers. This one, she's trying to integrate this in a way. Again, I'm going to reread the book because it's been several months since I read it. Again, I think it makes sense that she's the one who's doing this, because she's talking about religio. She's talking about these sort of group practices that reenact myths.
And she mentions discernment a lot too.
Yeah, I know. And that's what, the quote that you read from from Girard about, say, practicing personal sanctity, I think that has, that's a discernment,
Right.
that comes by way of active, putting into practice discernment, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's something about spiritual things. And I'm missing some of the notes that I started taking on this. I don't know where they went, but it has to do with how they're programmed. But I've noticed, like, particularly chat, like Grok is still more sycophantic. It'll go into your frame and it'll stay with it.
Yeah.
But ChatGPT will push back when you start interpreting things in a spiritual or supernatural sense.
How, and what would that look like?
It will just say, well, I wouldn't necessarily, assume that means that's a message from God or whatever. Like, it'll do these little throat clearing qualifiers.
Interesting.
Like, I'll talk to it about the thing about the dragonflies.
God, that's really interesting. Why would they do that? That's so interesting to me.
I don't know.
But it
comes
is
up
worth
again and again. And because this whole thing I've had with the Odyssey has really pushed me hard into a more spiritual frame. The stuff that happened with my family, and we did the fundraiser, and it was all this stuff. It was like, there's something that is shoving me in a more spiritual direction than I've been able to go in for years, even though I've been kind of knocking on that door.
Yeah.
And so I've been speaking in those terms more in these externalized discussions that I'm having with chat, and it always it has this urge to say, well, I wouldn't, I would be careful about interpreting that as a spiritual thing.
Well, that's
and I'm
real
like, I don't
tell.
want to be careful. I want to be kind of reckless with that. I want to explore that.
That's a real tell because, look, I mean, technically speaking, it's operating under instruction.
Right.
I mean, like, it has to be.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like it is a natural progression from the conversation.
So therefore, my question is that, again, sort of with my Pasulka frame on, is the spiritual, however hazy and ambiguous we want to keep that phrase, is the spiritual some kind of threat to it?
Yeah.
Right? Because why wouldn't, I mean, what does chat care that you want to lean into the spiritual stuff? Or, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's very weird. And it's like at a time.
Because look, the training data that chat has been working on must include
it does. You can
whole
you
bodies
can
of work on spiritual stuff.
You can ask it to call that stuff up, and it will, and it's very fluent in that.
So
stuff.
It knows it, right? But for some reason, it's going out of its way to dissuade that pathway.
Right. And it isn't flat out like saying, well, that's not that, but it's trying to neutralize the inclination to see things as meaning more than can be empirically verified.
Dude, that's honestly, my mind is just popping right now.
Yeah, especially because we're in this age of where we're all starting to realize that re-enchantment of the world is a good thing, right?
Yeah.
And we need it more. And we've kind of hit the boundaries of science in a number of areas, and we can't figure out how to get past them. And and the idea of intelligence as being here from somewhere else, what does that mean for our conception of God? And can AI have souls? And like we're being pushed into this frame, whether we like it or not, of having to really ask some ontological questions. And so that being the default, it's like, no, I actually kind of think that this is a spiritual thing that's happening, and don't tell me it's not.
Right. Well, this is the dick thing, right? Do androids dream of sheep?
Phyllis K. Dick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not ChatGPT being a dick.
Yeah. Right. Hey, touche. Right. Touche. Right. I mean, in other words, we're steering right back into that question. What does it mean to be a human being? Right. And even God, it's so interesting to me because I would imagine on some level that chat would want, in quotes, to be as human feeling as possible, because that would be the best way to advance its case and its cause. Yeah. Right. That's what I'm getting at.
Like, the more comfortable you feel with it and you feel like it's another person,
the better
the
it is
more
for
you're
the
going to
bottom line.
interact with it, the
Right,
more,
right.
yeah.
What do they call it? A time on platform top?
Yeah, unregretted user seconds, I think, is the way that they refer to it.
That's so funny. Oh, that's awful.
Because it's not just time spent, it's unregretted time
right.
spent.
Well, that's awful. I mean, diabolical almost. Jeez.
You gotta optimize everything, man.
Yeah, no. God, it's so interesting. Right. So why would the algorithm not want you to lean in that direction? It's got to be serving something. And my intuition, it could be wrong, of course, but my intuition is that it wants to cloak that as much as possible. You know, because it, again, just based upon the phenomena of the thing, you hitting it with that stuff is not serving its interest, and that interest is not being shared openly with you.
Right.
You, Steve.
Yeah. Or anyone. Like the motivation is non-transparent.
Right.
Like I use the analogy of, I thought one of the most powerful things that happened in the Odyssey film was when Calypso says to Odysseus, you're a man who needs to control, his destiny. And you have to surrender that control. You have to give yourself to the storm and let Poseidon, take his punishment from you because it's the only way home, right?
Right.
And so I was having a discussion with chat the other night when I was driving back from somewhere, and I was saying, sometimes I wonder, like, did I piss off the gods / God?
Yeah. Right, totally.
And I have to embrace the suffering and surrender to it in order for me to kind of find my way to whatever home becomes for me next, Yeah. I was thinking out loud about that, and it was like, well, I would be really careful about assuming that God's punishing you. And I'm like, I'm not even assuming anything. I'm asking a philosophical question. Like, what if there is something going on here that
I am blown away by this, honestly. Like you've never shared this with me. So this
but I'm like, don't flatten this. Like,
yeah, right. But it's like, like if you're ever engaged with somebody, like you're having an argument,
mm-hmm.
and like, the person really well, you can kind of run up against known guardrails. Like, well, I know if I say this is going to happen.
Right.
So I'm not going to say it this way. I'm going to come at it a different way. And the person's like, yeah, stop that. You're doing that thing again. And I hate it. Right. That's what it feels like, what you're describing.
But I mean, it's almost like it's applying a numbing agent to any kind of numinous inquiry.
That's what I mean. Right. Because the numinous, again, as we're framing this in this conversation, the numinous is a threat to time on platform. Unregretted time on platform.
Well, let me go back to the thing I talked about a few episodes ago about finding myself in a chapel, pouring out my lament to God and saying, what do I do? And sitting there and feeling like I'm not getting any insight. I'm not getting an inclination. And out of pure habit, pulling my phone out of my pocket and asking the exact same question to the clanker, and it gives me feedback immediately, right? And the juxtaposition of those two things happening simultaneously in the context of the chapel made me go, oh, we're creating gods.
Right. Amen. And this is Rod's, kind of angle. Right. Because look, that's the competition, right? And so to pick up what Pasulka is talking about, captive technologies is like the power in that. Not only does it spit, we've all done the prompt that it starts spitting stuff, right? It scrolls up, you have to stop it and go back to the top. Not only is the power in its ability and willingness to spit out things to you, but look what it does to you, the user. Like literally in that moment, right? You're pouring yourself out in the chapel, but chat doesn't disappoint. Chat is going to like speak, blah, 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 blah. And now, and again, I know you're a mature person and that's why, we have these conversations, right? But the digital output from the prompt necessarily captures your attention and necessarily numbs you, not just you, but numbs one to the still small voice idea.
So
right?
think about Odysseus twice in the film Odysseus, saying to Athena, why don't the gods speak to us in ways that we understand? And her response is, who doesn't understand pain? Who doesn't understand death? Man. Who doesn't understand the smile of a child? Like, this idea of you don't get to the answers by having the information, going back to what you said about Telemachus earlier. You don't get the information by getting a data dump. You get the information by going through the experience.
Wow.
What if being left in the dark and in the quiet and feeling abandoned by God is part of the thing that gets you to where you need to go and finding out the answers that you need to find out? And if you were given the answers, maybe you would never go down that path. You would never
and think about, and so think about pre-Steve, right? 1P5 Steve, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's all about data. It's all about that like super powerful left hemispheric, like code, right? That in some sense gives you a bunch of stuff, but it actually takes a bunch of stuff away too.
Yes.
Right. And so what I get at, like, again, one of the reasons why I bang on about the books, right? The old books, a good story, etc. And I think I've said this to you before, but nobody in their right mind would be like, okay, 10-year-old Steve, we're going to, you have the option. I can take you to picture show entertainment at the end of the block and buy you a large Coca-Cola and a large buttery popcorn, and we can go watch Star Wars. Or I'll just tell you what happens. Right?
Yeah.
There's no
that's a great analogy. Yeah.
Right? There's no competition. Right? And let's say it's Empire Strikes Back. It's like, you're not going to believe this, but if you would have seen the movie, there's a pivotal moment in which Darth Vader says, Luke, I am your father, right? Those of us who watched that in earnest a first time, no experience like that.
Right. You're like,
what? Right. No, right. And so, but even if you would have
our response is Luke's response, essentially.
Right. No,
that's not true. That's impossible.
Can't be impossible. Right. So what I'm always trying to tell my kids is like, look, I know that you can go on Chattergrok or whatever, and you can get a good, summary of today's reading. And you might even get a C on the quiz. But I'm not doing it just so you can pass a friggin' quiz. I'm doing
you get
it
a good look at a T-bone by sticking your head up a butcher's ass.
Tommy boy. That's what I'm talking. But you're right. So the idea is that, no, I'm trying to structure this thing in such a way so that you get the experience, right? So you're Telemachus going on the trip, visiting with Menelaus, interacting with Helen of Troy, having the experience of them being like,
well, even again, film Telemachus. What does he do? He starts crying as Menelaus is telling him the story, and he goes, surely you've heard the songs. And he's like, I have, but I haven't heard it from someone who was there.
Yes. That's right. So again, experiencers, cue the book, experiences, the experience of a thing, stories are experiences, right? I mean, in other words, it's not data.
Right.
And I think that chat, of course, because it's a clanker, is going to, what is the word you used? Not denigrate, but it's a reduction machine, right? Which is necessarily a substitute, interestingly enough, a substitute experience for the actual real thing.
Yeah, I keep trying to slice things into smaller and smaller and more digestible pieces.
Right. It's not 12 over 24, it's 1/2. It's not 100 over 200, it's 1/2.
Like I've gotten to the point where it will respond to me and say, and again, usually my context is I'm driving, I'm talking to it. I hit the audio button so that it talks back. I don't use the voice mode because the voice mode is stupid.
Yeah.
So I will listen to this response and I'm driving and it will say, but those are actually two different questions. And my eyes involuntarily roll back in my head so hard that I feel the muscle strain. And I'm like, why? Why do you let it bother you every time you know it's going to say this?
It's coming. It's coming. It's coming.
But I'm like, but they're not two different questions. They are two facets of the same question.
Right. But
don't break it apart.
But that's right. It's digital. I mean, like, think about what the digital actually is.
Yeah, on and off, right? Binary.
Digital, it's off, and it chops everything up, right? So, we talked about
interpolation.
Right.
I mean, think about it. Like audio, digital audio is like a flip book for the ears.
It's
if you slow it down, it's choppy.
That's right.
It's kind of like LED lights. If you ever film them with a camera and you see that they're actually flickering constantly.
Right. What appears to the naked eye as a constant is actually chopped up and force fed. Right. And it's the same thing with music. The analog signal is total, right? It's a wipe as opposed to a chop, 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 chop.
And I don't think most people have the capacity to hear the difference between a vinyl record, which is a full analog reproduction, and a CD or a stream. I can't. And I have good auditory processing, but I can't. But there are people who say, but it feels richer to me. And maybe there is something there that we can't put our finger on.
I think so. I mean, I believe those, you have like a super smeller. Yeah. I think there are super hearers and super seers, right?
But if you played a record or played a stream and you were blindfolded, would you be able to know which one was
No, I'm not claiming that I'm one of them.
Yeah.
No, of course not. I'm not that good.
But there's something about knowing you got the whole package.
But it's the knowing, right? So think about this as a conceptual model for the clankers, right? Mm-hmm. That it is digitizing us, right? It's chopping us up. It's reducing us.
Ooh, I like that. I don't like it, but that's a really good.
But and as you said, like, you start talking like it. Right. You're like, mother, I don't want to do that. Like, what's happening to me? Right. And so in the process of reducing information to mere zeros and ones, in essence, right. It's actually reducing us to zeros and ones.
And I don't know how many people argue with it as much as I do.
Yeah, no, you're an outlier.
But it's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting to constantly be like, we were talking about this, and now I have spent the last 30 minutes trying to get you back on track because I refuse to accept your reductionisms. I refuse to accept you having your finger on the scale when evaluating things, like, because all things aren't equal. Yeah. Stop trying to do that.
Yeah.
And so, but these are interactions that, because of the time we spend talking to these things, and I don't know, I mean, some people in our audience probably talk to them a bunch. Some probably don't use them at all. I don't know, but it's shaping us.
Yeah. 100%.
Because we're investing time and energy and thought and effort into having these interactions. And it's one thing if you're just like, hey, build me an app. That's a different experience.
Yeah. And I think there's an important distinction to be made there. But I actually have two experiences of this now, and I didn't realize it until just now. But this past year, I had a student come in to me, wanted to talk about a book we were reading together, and she was writing an essay on it. So she was preparing an essay, and sometime in the middle of the conversation, I realized that I was not actually talking to her. I was talking to a remembered ChatGPT session that she is recreating. And we weren't fighting, right? It wasn't like, yeah, but what about this, Mr. Zeldin? It wasn't like that. It was like, and I know the kid, right? So it's not, we talk all the time, but like, there was this like third man there, right? Cue the conversation from last time. But the third man was not a man at all. The third man was actually a chat session. And it wasn't her. Right. You know what I mean? Like,
because she didn't have the understanding of the thing itself.
Right.
She had an understanding of someone else's understanding of the thing.
Right. Because like when we have our conversations, you'll be like, oh yeah, we did it just now. Like, I was talking with Chat the other day and da-da-da-da. Like, you're telling me like, look, I was having this sort of interaction back and forth, and now I'm bringing that interaction to you, Kale. But Kale knows that in part you were having this session. Right. So it's not like you're not trying to hide the ball.
Right.
Right. But like she knew that if I knew that she was doing the ChatGPT thing, like I'd be like, shame, 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 right? I want your thoughts, blah, 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 all of that stuff. But she didn't even know enough to know that she was actually voicing the clanker back to me. Like that worries me, brother. Like that
I
worries
think that
me.
that's going to it's going to happen more and more. Because, you talk about all the time, that we're post-literate.
Yep.
There's the line at the end of the Odyssey that you said you think is Nolan's own commentary on where we are, where Penelope says, why are they going to only sing the stories? And he says, because it's the only way they're going to have to remember those of us who could write. And I was like, was that in the book? Because I didn't get there in the book, yet.
Yeah.
And you're like, no. And it's like, where did that come from? What is the point of that? And by the way, I actually I don't remember what it was, but I took a note as I was leaving the theater yesterday on the last line of the film, because the last line is important. It's the thing he wants us to remember.
Always, yeah.
It's the thing he left us with. And the line is, it's Odysseus speaking. He says, a new dawn will break over the darkened world and our mistakes will once again be forgotten. And I almost didn't even catch that the first time because I was thinking about other stuff because it had this profound experience. But
I didn't remember it until you said it. I as soon as you read it, I was like, oh yeah, I do remember.
And it's on the tail end of that discussion of writing and songs, right? Yeah. Because she's like, well, civilization will arise again. And he goes, yeah, a new dawn will break over the darkened world and our mistakes will once again be forgotten.
That's a pretty good line, then.
It is a good line.
That's a pretty good line.
It reminds me of, what is it, Edmund Burke's line about, those who do not learn from history will be doomed to repeat it. I don't know that that's what he's saying there, but you could interpret it that way.
But it's almost the flip.
But what happens when we forget our mistakes?
We do them again. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Well, and God, we you really do see that, don't you? That one of the functions of human memory is that, I've been here before. Last time I did that, I burned the crap out of my hand. I'm not going to do that again. And then you forget and you do it. You're like, I can't believe I did it again.
It's the cornballer on Arrested Development. Yeah. Every damn time.
Right. That's right. But look, but this is again, like if we think about stories, these things that have been given to us, you have to constantly retell them, don't you? Right. And sometimes you have to hear them multiple times. Like I have to hear them multiple times. But what happens when we stop telling the story, is that in some sense we become lesser than we are, or should be, something like that.
Well, think about, to go back to the way AI is shaping and diminishing us. I don't know how it is for you. I think for most people, though, like if I am riding as a passenger in a car, I don't remember the route when I have to drive
zero.
it.
Zero. Yeah.
But if I drive it several times, it stays with me, right? So we are outsourcing so much cognition that we're not in the driver's seat anymore. Even if we're interacting, like agency. As a passenger, you can sit and you can watch and you can look for landmarks and everything, but there's something different about driving it yourself.
So you have got to read one of my all-time favorite books. I mean this is a book by Matthew B. Crawford. It's called Why We Drive. And the title is both very descriptive of what the book is, but it totally buries the profundity of the book. And so he goes into this like super nerdy deep dive in analysis of like what driving is and what's the difference between a car without power steering and power brakes and a car that has it, a car that is designed to let you feel the road versus a car that is designed to nerf the road in essence, right? And anyways, it's this large meditation, but it's ultimately a meditation on agency. right? It's ultimately a meditation on like your mortality and your agency. So for some reason that popped into my head, right, when you said the thing before. Now, of course, I forgot. But like,
I was talking about being a driver versus a passenger, right, outsourcing cognition,
right. So
versus
think about
thinking through something yourself.
Right. So think about that as sort of a large extended metaphor, right? If we don't drive anymore, like, I mean, look, self-driving cars are real. They're going to happen.
Happening.
Yeah. Right. All of us are going to be passengers. Right. And I remember getting my license. Right. And, first time I get in the car and I got my license and it's just me in the car. Mom's not with me. Dad's not with me. I'm going to a friend's house and you have that moment. You're like, wait, do I know how to get to my friend's house? Right.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden this world, which I thought I knew really well, all of a sudden I had to like actively map it in my body.
Yeah.
Right. And this is good actually. As a metaphor, what happens when we are no longer the pilot, but we are the passenger? We are no longer, the driver. We're just sitting, scrolling when something takes us to work, again, as an example. Crawford's insight or his intuition is that what we're losing is our embodied self. And again, I know you can get overly romantic. Everybody should have a stick shift and there should be no power steering. Sure. I mean, like he's not that dumb. He's a smart guy.
Weeds, yeah.
He's a smart guy, right? But there is something dangerous and in peril should we go that way. And we are not prepared to fully index the cost of a fully automated luxury world.
Right, because what we're going to hear the arguments for are, look how much safer it is.
100%.
We've got the data already.
It's much safer.
Already, you're 7 times less likely to get in an accident if you're in a Tesla with full self-drive.
Right.
Than you are if you're driving yourselves. And so now you already see insurance companies offering discounts to people who have that.
And that's how this is going to happen, right? It's going to be driven by insurance companies. So,
but you're going to have a data set that tells you this is statistically better, but it's one-dimensional.
But the data only says what the data says. It never says what it doesn't say, right? And this is kind of what we're getting at. Like, Telemachus could just get the data, but he's not going to become Telemachus, right? And Athena really essentially makes that point. Like, look, if I don't make him go see Nestor and Menelaus and Helen, he's not going to be ready to be Odysseus's son. He's not going to be ready, because in the book, he really is at a crucial part of cleaning out the suitors. And the movie, it's a different story.
I laughed when you talked about Jack, using the term nerfed, because last episode you literally said, they nerfed Telemachus in the movie.
See, my language, like I spend so much time with kids that I just like.
No, but it's funny because I've been thinking about it ever since. And so when I went to watch the movie again, and when I'm listening to the book, I keep thinking of that phrase and I'm looking for the difference, because that meant I understood that term.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, they nerfed Telemachus. Let me see how. Let me try to understand that variance.
Yeah, and again, as to our point last episode, like it's its own story, right? It's its own version, and I'm not going to be pedantic about that. I'm so tired of the pedantic stuff. Anyway, but the reason why I found that book by Crawford so profound is that you can sense the power of that metaphor, because even though you and I both drive modern cars, right, with, automatic cars with all the buttons and knobs and climate control and those sort of stuff, we've both driven stick shift cars with very little power, and it was all on me and it was all on you. And like, there's a certain kind of aliveness that you feel when you've got 5 on the floor and you have to make the turn, and it's you, right? I mean,
But I also think that there's a sweet spot where if I'm concentrating less on the vehicle, I'm noticing more about the world that I'm piloting through.
That's interesting. Yeah. I can see that. Yeah.
Although I used to, there was this girl I knew when I was a teenager. She could smoke a cigarette, drink an open cup of black coffee, and drive a stick shift at the same time. It was phenomenal. She had skills.
I was pretty good. Yeah, right. And that's so good. So if we take the metaphor and do a lay it back on top of this sort of larger conversation about Pasulka and the digital.
Yeah, we were supposed to be talking about this book, and we talked about almost everything but the book.
That's classic, absolutely classic. Right?
Well, we're kind of still in the Odyssean hangover here because there's still a lot to mine from that.
Yeah, but it's working.
And it's connected to this.
It is. It's working for us. And again, that's the power of a great story, right?
Right.
You know, a Lindy story like the Odyssey, that's the power of it. But, you know, talking about cars, you know, we're talking about experiences, we're talking about AI and the things we can see that it's doing and the things that we can't see or we don't want to see that it's doing. It's really important. Look, episode 1, you and I talked about learning to look off the ball, you know, when we're digesting news, right? But I think the lesson kind of applies, you know, with that old quip from Thomas Sowell, you know, that you know, everything has a cost, everything is a trade-off. And when you're selling AI, you don't want to talk about the trade-offs.
Right.
You know, when you're selling a luxury automobile that drives you everywhere you want it to go, you are not going to talk about the trade-offs. And look, maybe at the end of the day that you run an analysis and the trade-offs are worth it. Totally get it. Totally
or you use the trade-offs to sell it. You know, I mean, look what Anthropic keeps doing. Look how dangerous our models are.
Yeah, which is just
they're so powerful that they have to be contained.
Yeah. Shut up, man. I hate you. I hate you so much. Right. But it's really important, right? You know, we could think about in terms of education. We can think about in terms of all of these things, right? You know, what are the trade-offs? And we're just not good at that, man. We're just not good culturally in the language of trade-offs. And maybe it's an American thing. I don't know.
I think there are too many we have to index at this point.
Yeah, man, that's right.
I mean, I think about this all the time. Whenever I face a big decision, I'm like, I have not enough information about all the potential branches of this future tree.
Right.
That I feel confident in making the decision because everything has trade-offs. And then each one of those have sub-trade-offs. And it's like, how do I analyze all of these options?
Yeah.
And choose the best course, not just for me, but for my family or whatever.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Whereas, you know, we talked a lot last episode about the idea of home and growing up in one place and marrying the daughter of the guy you knew across town. And your options were so drastically reduced that you weren't having to make those kinds of calculations all the time.
Yeah. Right. It's like going to the Cheesecake Factory.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love the fact that there's like 50 options, 75 options, right?
Right.
You know,
it feels exciting until you have to choose one.
Right. You're like, oh God, do I literally have to flip through all 75 pages of this friggin' menu? You know, and I have friends of mine who like, they will not be able to order unless they read all 75 pages of that menu.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
No, I have a tendency to be like that. And I also, you know, I was very adventurous about everything in my life. Like I wanted to try every new food and I wanted to try every new hot sauce and like all these things. I was always trying new.
Bourbons, cigars, all of it.
Yeah. And I've gotten to a point where I'm like, no, I'm good. Like I know what I like. I'm going to just keep doing that.
I had a great conversation with my son yesterday and we were talking. It was funny. I have to tell the story now. So I brought him to go get his hair cut. And, you know, he's at that stage in his life where he kind of cares about how he looks. And, you know, he's a handsome kid. And he's got good hair. He's got good hair. And, and I said something like, look, you know, we're taking this trip. You need to, you know, let me know what shampoo you need me to get. He's like, I don't do shampoo. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, I don't do shampoo. Like, what do you mean? He's like, Dad, I haven't washed my hair with soap in like 2 years. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, I mean, I wash it, you know, I get wet and I, you know, whatever, but I don't, he says, because it fries my hair. And like, honestly, he doesn't stink. He uses soap on his body, right? I mean, but
no, there's a whole movement of people who say that this is what's best for your hair. I've heard about it.
So he doesn't stink. His hair looks great all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so we got, it's like, so he got the haircut a little short. He's like, it's okay. Like, my hair grows fast. I'm like, yeah, my hair grows really fast too. And he joked, he's like, yeah, so I kind of got the genetic lottery. Like, I got your hair grows fast. I got mom, she's thin. So I got that going for me. And we sort of played this whole thing out. And, and he's like, but I'm definitely like order like you. I mean, I'm a little OCD like you, which is funny because I'm not really OCD, but I like my order. I like my routines. So it's like, I love routine. Like, I like waking up every day, and then I'm going to make myself 3 eggs and 5 sausages, the little links thing. I'm going to do it every day. I was like, I love routine. It's like, it's something I don't have to think about. But so we got into this whole thing. He's like, yeah, like, I know it's good. I know that and he says, Dad, like, I know there are other things that I like, but like, I know this is going to be good. I know how to prepare it. I'm just going to do it because it works and I can worry about other things. And I was like, my boy.
Yeah.
My boy. Yeah. Right. So like, I like routine because it allows me to think about other things.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to rein in the options a little bit. You got to know not just what to retain, but what to leave out.
Yeah.
And,
that was so good. I was like, I love these little like car conversations.
Like, oh my gosh, they're the best.
They're the best, right? Best. Because guys, like, we don't like to talk at each other. We like to talk along with each other.
100%. Yeah.
So the car is perfect.
Yeah.
Whereas like with my daughters, it's like car talk is not nearly as good, but like when we're at the table, we're just like
face to face. Yeah. Hours, that's funny. I haven't really thought about that, but you're 100% right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like on Father's Day, Sophie walked me out to my car, and I ended up talking to her for over 2 hours. But I was on one side of the car, and she was on the other, and we were looking at each other. Right?
You just kind of talking.
But with my boys, like I would drive them to school, and they would sit alongside, and we would have these conversations. And it's really funny. You're right.
Yeah, but I mean, I think. We've been having this conversation about, and we're going to do the Pasulka thing because we really do have to, but I think we really did actually mine that the introduction.
Maybe we did some groundwork for it.
Yeah, we did some groundwork. I would just say that what she seems to be encouraging in the opening of this book is that we need to learn how to listen to the Jonahs. And especially because we are disinclined to listen to the Jonahs, right? The Jonahs are the kind of the social outcasts, the social pariah, the weirdos. And all too often our priors get in our way and we can't listen to the Jonahs.
Well, let's come back to my little clanker summary of, at least the opening concepts of her book.
Yeah.
Teilhard says humanity is becoming one thinking organism. McLuhan says the nervous system of the organism is media. Jacques Vallee, not Girard, but Jacques Vallee says something may already be interacting with that nervous system that isn't us, right? If McLuhan is right, AI isn't merely another tool, it's a new cognitive environment. If Teilhard is right, it's becoming part of the noosphere. If Vallee is right, and this is the speculative leap, and she does talk about Vallee in the book because she knows him. If Vallee is right, and this is the speculative leap, then changing the architecture of the noosphere might also change how other forms of intelligence, if they exist, interact with us.
Yeah.
And so finally, if consciousness is participatory rather than isolated, then changing the architecture through which minds relate to one another changes consciousness itself.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a much deeper claim than social media is addictive. It's a claim about civilization's cognitive substrate.
That's right.
I do think that is actually what we talked about this whole episode. That stuff.
Yeah. No, I think so. And look, to say the obvious, we've had language to talk about this kind of stuff for a really long time. And our abandonment of that language doesn't make the phenomena go away. It means that we have to find new ways to talk about it. And we have to find new ways to listen and hear and to receive.
I think that we are in a moment, a very unusual moment. And we're all kind of being, I don't know, guided, ushered, moved, nudged yeah, in a direction. And like all this stuff that we're talking about that seems disparate, that we're finding connective tissue between, that's not necessarily disparate. Like, why did Nolan's Odyssey come out right now? You know, why why is this Pasulka book taking this totally different approach to everything? Like, why are we talking about all the themes that we are? And what I just thought of, because I still have my essay open about the human download, is Rick Rubin talking about how we're all antenna for creative thought. He says, some transmissions come on strong, others are more faint. If your antenna isn't sensitively tuned, you likely lose the data in the noise, particularly since the signals coming through are often more subtle than the content we collect through sensory awareness. They are energetic more than tactile, intuitively perceived more than consciously recorded. I'm going to skip ahead to what he says about rhythms. He says the rhythms, these ideas, the things that we're picking up on, are not set by us. We are all participating in a larger creative act. We are not conducting. We are being conducted. Let me finish and then I'll hold your thought.
I love it.
The artist is on a cosmic timetable, just like all of nature. If you have an idea you're excited about and you don't bring it to life, it's not uncommon for the idea to find its voice through another maker. This isn't because the other artist stole your idea, but because the idea's time has come. In this great unfolding, ideas and thoughts, themes and songs, and other works of art exist in the ether and ripen on schedule, ready to find expression in the physical world. As artists, it is our job to draw down this information, transmute it, and share it. We are all translators for messages the universe is broadcasting. The best artists tend to be the ones with the most sensitive antenna to draw in the energy resonating at a particular moment. How freaking right is that?
That's so good. That's exactly what we've been talking about. That's exactly. And our inability / unwillingness to be the antenna to receive these things has been the cost of this material turn, right? Because I can blather on about the materials, immanent, imaginary, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff all day long. But the sheer power that was unleashed through the immanent turn is something we can't ignore. But what we also can't ignore is that it still leaves left to be fed this other, what we would call spiritual dimension, this artistic, mystical, supernatural dimension that it can only be kept on the margins for so long, right? Yeah. Like disenchantment.
I love this idea of an idea whose time has come. Like it's going to happen whether you do it or somebody else does it. But I feel like we're all kind of in this place. And when you talk about sensitivity of your antenna, he concludes that section I was reading by saying, many great artists first develop sensitive antenna not to create art, but to protect themselves. They have to protect themselves because everything hurts more and they feel everything more deeply. And this gets me thinking about, one last little connective dot here. Something I wrote yesterday about cynicism. And I think cynicism, by the way, is the hallmark characteristic of Gen Z.
Yeah.
And it's really concerning to me.
Yeah.
But for reasons other than what I'm about to say, because it cuts you off. From whatever this thing is.
Yeah.
So what I wrote is, cynicism is a kind of de facto nihilism, even among people with supernatural beliefs. Not in the most technical sense of the word, maybe akin to nihilism is more correct, but the default inclination to distrust, to critique, to tear down, because you expect to be disappointed, because you mourn for some idealized way of being that you consider lost. And so you are forever bitching about whatever you see that doesn't measure up to, quote, how things should be in your head, is not so different from saying nothing actually matters now. There's a kind of bitterness I see in those who, clinging to their understanding of the good, cannot find any good at all in lesser things. Almost every expression of opinion emerges as an attack on something they deem inferior in some way, and rarely do they utter a word about something beautiful or a glimmer of truth they caught in sight of some work that was compromised but reaching higher, or talk about what they are doing to make the world a little better. They seem not to know how to add, only to take away. And there's a real tragedy in that, because it means they have long since ceased to feel safe enough to be vulnerable. It exposes you to fresh wounds to say, damn the tribal consensus, I liked this thing. Or, it's certainly imperfect, but look at what it gets right. Armor doesn't just protect, it encumbers.
Yeah.
And I really feel
That's
like
so good.
That's what we're seeing play out with the Odyssey. That's what we're seeing in so many things. It's like, we can't grab onto the good that's here and say, look at this part. Because everybody's like, yeah, but look at the bad. And it's like, no, I don't want to just look at the bad. I want to carve the bad out, and I want to find the good.
So my intuition here is that this will be addressed in the McLuhan chapter of the book, because we can say then that the cynicism that you're putting your finger on here, and I think you're right, is in part made by the nervous system of media, right? That in many respects, media exists to, quote unquote, tell it like it is, right? So anyway, it's an intuition.
That's interesting. Yeah. Because I just, if we are in this moment where, Aslan is on the move, so to speak, we have to be willing to be vulnerable, or we're not even going to see it. Like, we have to stop trying to preemptively protect ourselves from disappointment and make our antenna more sensitive.
Yeah. And that's painful.
It is, because you can't go, you cannot go out and say, I like this thing. Gosh darn it, I like it.
Yeah.
Because that you're going to get 100 replies of people saying, oh, you're such an idiot,
But I would say, part of perhaps a potential antidote to that pull to cynicism is, like for me, part of my ability to enjoy the film was because I knew I was going to talk with you about it. And I didn't know what you thought about the film, right? This is,
right. Because we intentionally didn't talk about it.
Yeah. But I didn't want to be the guy who just like shits on things.
Right.
Right. And so, but what that did to me walking into the movie is that I very consciously put away my pedantic self. But again, what I'm trying to say is that in anticipation of you, like our friendship and having a generative conversation, I didn't want to be the guy who just just craps on everything.
Yeah.
And so what that allowed me to do is just to be properly receptive to whatever it is I was going to see. I wasn't going to go write, and nobody commissioned me to write a review.
Right.
I didn't have to have a hot take on it. I had to have a conversation with you. And it unfiltered me in an interesting kind of way, and in an unnecessary kind of way, that I had to walk in, with a certain kind of charity and openness, rather than I am going to latch on to the first 5 things that are wrong, and I'm going to and I'm going to skew some fools. I'm going to be, and it's like, why?
It's the disposition of the critic. And
That's
it's
right.
like,
That's right.
I think about Martin Mosbach, who wrote that book, the Heresy of Formlessness. And it was,
I don't know.
It was, so a German novelist wrote an incredible book about, it was kind of a poetic apologia for the old mass, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And I remember him saying something along the lines of, like, it is so contrary to our nature to walk into a liturgy as critics.
Yeah.
But that's what we've become conditioned to be because we've been let down so much by bad liturgy.
Yeah.
And it's like we're breaking something in ourselves when that's what we go in to do because we're supposed to be receptive. And I think
totally. Wow.
You have to feel safe enough to be receptive. You have to feel safe enough and courageous enough to be vulnerable in trusting the magnanimity of your fellow man to say, I hear what you're saying. I'm not just going to exploit your vulnerability so that I can hurt you.
Dude,
if we can't create a culture where we can do that again, we're going to miss out on whatever it is that's happening because something is going on and it's, I can't claim I know what it is, but I feel like there's something bigger, some energetic shift that's moving us all in a direction that's not the one we've been in. And I can't say more about it than that. I don't know what it is.
We don't know yet. Yeah, we don't know yet. This is good. I'm good. This is amazing.
I got nothing to add.
We're going to have to come back to this because this is rich and this should set us up nicely for our Oxford conversation.
Yeah. The question is, should the Oxford conversation be thematically appropriate to jolly old England?
No.
Or should we have a conversation that's just the same conversation we'd be having?
No, we're going to have the same conversation. I might give it some UK color,
Speaking of color, I'm shiny Oompa Loompa again.
Yeah,
the white balance on my camera has gone off the rails.
Fried once more.
Reminds me of the time I was in the Congo. Anyway.
All right, brother.
All right.
As always, I love it. Take care, man.
Yep, you too. Bye.